Chapter 96. At night, there was a row of soldiers standing in front of Sun Fu's gate. It did not make sense to use soldiers to guard his own gate. However, Sun Xiangfu was like a bird that was startled by the twang of a bough. He did not care so much. All of the servants in the Fu were interrogated one by one. For the time being, nothing suspicious was found. Right Army Governor Xiao Ju and Imperial Censor Yuan Baozhen both lived in the Fu. Sun Xiangfu also noticed the undercurrent under these two's calmness. He sat in the room and sighed. Sun Ling had already learned the whole story from the servants and said, "Father, why are you still worried about this?" Sun Xiang felt extremely lucky. If you hadn't been so meddlesome and brought those women back to the residence, none of this would have happened. Father, I took them back to the Fu for my own use. I did not ask you to use them to entertain guests. Sun Ling could not take it anymore and rolled his eyes. Now that there is trouble, how can you blame me? Those women are useless. If they wanted to assassinate someone, they should have succeeded in one try. Who knows who will benefit if they died for nothing? Before he finished, Sun Ling's mouth was covered by Sun Xiangfu, who rushed over. Sun Xiangfu looked around and scolded, "Do you want to die? Saying such things. I did not say anything wrong." Sun Ling moved closer and said in a low voice, "Father, do you also not like that Xiao Ju?" Sun Xiangfu did not speak. Was this a question of whether he liked her or not? Compared to whether he liked Xiao Ju or not, he should be more worried about whether Xiao Ju liked him or not. I heard that military governor Xiao and Darren Yuan seem to have some disagreements. When the two of them fight, you just need to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Darren Yuan is not bad and is friendly. You can help him secretly. The enemy of an enemy is a friend. Sun Ling said, "If something really happens in the end, you will have gotten rid of Xiao Ju and become friends with Darren Yuan. Wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone?" He thought his words made sense. Sun Xiangfu suddenly slapped him on the head. Sun Xiangfu scolded, "How can it be as simple as you say? You didn't see it today. Xiao Ju." He thought of something and fear flashed across his eyes. She's not easy to deal with. Inside the room, Yuan Baozhen sat in front of the table, his expression uncertain. The average-looking guard was standing behind him, but his eyes were also flickering. "Xiao Ju is suspicious of me." After a moment, Yuan Baozhen said, "If today's matter doesn't work, I'm afraid there won't be another chance." "Why would he suspect you?" The bodyguard, the man named Ding Yi, asked. "I don't know." Thinking of what happened in Sun Xiangfu's study, Yuan Baozhen was angry. Xiao Ju's suspicion was blatant and her tone was arrogant. He did not know how to respond. He had just arrived in Liangzhou City and had never interacted with Xiao Ju before. No matter what, Xiao Ju should not suspect him. Also, how could Qing Lisu be blind? Yuan Baozhen frowned. Was this also arranged in advance? Ding Yi shook his head. "I've never heard of it. There was no point in suspecting him. Now that all the assassins were dead, no one was alive. Even if he was full of questions, there was no one to answer." "That Qing Lisu is a bit strange," Ding Yi said. "If he hadn't stopped them today, perhaps Xiao Ju would have drunk the poisoned wine." With his reminder, Yuan Baozhen remembered something. At the banquet tonight, when Xiao Ju raised her wine cup, Qing Lisu's shout of "Don't drink it" came suddenly and loudly, causing the assassins to act prematurely. If he hadn't stopped them, they wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. How did he know that the wine was poisoned? Yuan Baozhen muttered. After a moment, he stroked the oil lamp on the table and said, "Since Xiao Ju and the others are in the residence, this is our chance. I'll test Qing Lisu tomorrow. If this young man is really blind, maybe we can use him to tie down Xiao Ju and save the country." He Yan didn't know that in these invisible places, there was a surging undercurrent. At this moment, she was sitting in the room, arguing with Fei Nu. After her eyes were damaged, Xiaoju called Fei Nu to guard He Yan's room. After all, there were already assassins in the Sun residence. Who knew if there would be more hidden people among the servants? He Yan didn't feel at ease if he was alone. With Fei Nu guarding, it was much safer. Brother Fei Nu, please leave. I can really do it myself. He Yan had a headache. You can't see, Fei Nu's reply was very stiff. Young master asked me to guard you. Then you can just guard the door. If you were to be my personal servant, I would be very uncomfortable. He Yan replied seriously. Can you leave? Forgive me for not being able to comply. Why are you the same as your master? Can't you be more reasonable? Xiaoju had just arrived at the door when he heard this sentence. He stopped and stood at the door. What happened? Fei Nu said, Young master. Without waiting for Fei Nu to finish speaking, He Yan had already looked in the direction of the door. Her eyes were still covered with cloth and her hands were clutching some clothes. Is uncle here? Brother Fei Nu is crazy. He wants to help me bathe. Fei Nu's lips moved. He seemed to be speechless at her insulted expression. He explained, he can't see. I'm afraid, uncle. It's not like you don't know that I have a fiancé. My body is as clean as ice and as clean as jade. How can it be seen by others? That young man's voice was bright and cheerful. The desolation and panic from before had already been swept away, and he was back to his usual unreasonable appearance. If I were to break up because of your marriage, big brother Fei Nu, would you be able to compensate me with a fiancé? She muttered, you don't even have one yourself. Fei Nu, Xiaoju looked at her and mocked, are you sure you won't drown? The bathtub was placed behind the screen in the middle of the room. The water was not deep. Perhaps it was because the days in the Sun residence were so extravagant that there was a circle of flower petals scattered on top of it. He Yan had never used such an exquisite flower bath when she was a woman. Now that she was a man, she actually used it. Uncle, did you forget that in Liangzhou, I could shoot a sparrow in the sky blindfolded? How can I drown? He Yan said, don't worry. Besides, if I really become blind, I can't let others do things for me for the rest of my life. Uncle, you have that possibility, but I'd better forget about it. Fei Nu was also speechless. He had seen many brothers in the 9 Banners Battalion. Occasionally there would be some who were missing an arm or a leg. Although they could pass their days with a smile, in any case, they would be depressed for a period of time. He Yan was the first person he had ever seen to recover from this kind of mood. If it were not for the cloth covering her face, people would wonder if she was really blind. Xiaoju saw that she was full of vigor, so she did not feel like paying attention to her. She only said to Fei Nu, come out. Fei Nu followed Xiaoju out. He Yan finally breathed a sigh of relief when the door was closed. She did not remove the cloth covering her face. She took off her clothes and entered the bathtub, soaking her whole body in the water. If someone else was here, they would be surprised. She did this just like any other ordinary person. Her movements were without the slightest hesitation, as if she could see everything. The temperature of the water was just right. She had always bathed in the river next to the city guard station. The river water was ice cold, so it was not as comfortable as this. However, even though it was comfortable, she did not dare to be greedy. The steam rose and blurred her figure. The smile on He Yan's face also relaxed. She thought that she would be attending the banquet, but she did not expect that she would have to stay here for a few more days. In this way, coupled with the fact that she could not see, there would be more people serving her. She would have to be more careful of her identity being exposed. She still remembered Ding Yi's last movement at the banquet. That subtle movement of bending his finger. If she had not been staring at Ding Yi, she would have missed it. But because she recognized Ding Yi, she knew that the servant who rushed out to attack Xiaoju was arranged by Ding Yi. Then, this matter became very strange. Ding Yi was He Rufei's servant. Yuan Baozhen was also He Rufei's friend. Ding Yi colluded with the assassins at the banquet to assassinate Xiao Ju. In a way, it could be said that it was He Rufei's idea. But why did He Rufei want to kill Xiao Ju? In her previous life, when she was He Rufei, she and Xiao Ju did not interfere with each other's business. They were even classmates in the Xiancheng gymnasium, so they could be considered friends. Now that He Rufei had returned to his original self, he did not have any enmity with Xiao Ju. Why would he use such a vicious method to kill Xiao Ju? Perhaps, she should go talk to Yuan Baozhen. At night, He Yan and Xiao Ju slept in the same room as Fei Nu. Because they were afraid that there would be other assassins in the Sun residence, they did not separate. However, there were many courtyards in the Sun residence. This room was divided into an inner room and an outer room. Naturally, second young master Xiao lived in the inner room. In the outer room, Fei Nu and He Yan each slept on one side of the outer room. He Yan felt that this way of sleeping was as if she was protecting Xiao Ju. Thinking about how she was injured because of Xiao Ju, she did not expect that she would not even be able to sleep on the inner room. Thinking about it, she really felt that it was not worth it. However, she did not think for long before He Yan fell asleep. This sleep was actually very peaceful. Early the next morning, He Yan was woken up by Fei Nu. She sat up, her eyes were filled with darkness. She subconsciously asked, "What time is it?" 7 in the morning. Fei Nu replied. "Oh." He Yan touched the cloth covering her eyes again. This time, she directly untied it. From darkness to light, if one was able to see, they would definitely have to squint their eyes to adapt. However, He Yan only opened her eyes and did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort. Fei Nu's heart sank. She asked, "Can you see?" He Yan blankly shook her head. There was a moment of silence. "Maybe, it will be fine in a few days." Fei Nu clumsily comforted her. He did not sympathize with He Yan. However, he heard that during the banquet last night, He Yan not only reminded Xiao Ju, but also personally helped Xiao Ju deal with the assassins. These were two different things. Although this young man's identity was suspicious, he had not harmed Xiao Ju so far. "Is uncle not here?" He Yan asked. Young master went out. He Yan nodded again. After thinking for a while, she covered her eyes with the cloth again. Fei Nu was surprised. "Why are you wearing it again?" The herbal medicine had already been used for a day and was no longer effective. Today, He Yan did not complain that her eyes hurt, so the cloth was useless. Wearing it was actually uncomfortable. "It's better to wear it to remind others that I can't see now." He Yan smiled. People have to be more tolerant towards a blind person. I can't avoid others, but others can avoid me, right? Between wearing the cloth and not wearing it, it was obvious that the former looked more like a blind person. Fei Nu's heart trembled. It was as if something flashed through his mind. After a moment, he did not say anything. He only said, "Let's go and eat first." He Yan nodded. Xiao Ju was not here. After Fei Nu and He Yan freshened up, they sat in the room and ate. The food was also bought by Fei Nu in advance. He Yan did not want Fei Nu to help him. He ate very slowly, but his movements were steady. He did not spill the soup. The maids that Sun Xiangfu called were all dismissed. With Xiao Ju as an example, He Yan did not dare to trust any of the maids here. After eating, Fei Nu ordered the maids to clear away the leftovers on the table. He Yan sat alone for less than a moment when someone's voice sounded. The footsteps were very light. If it was not for her excellent hearing, it would be difficult for ordinary people to hear. It was not one person, but two people. Xiao Ju did not need to be like this. When Fei Nu left, He Yan already knew who it was. However, she did not show it on her face. She still sat quietly, as if in a daze. The footsteps fell in front of her. It seemed that the person was carefully observing her. He Yan's eyes were covered with the cloth and did not move. After a while, the person did not seem to find any flaws. Suddenly, he said, "Young Master Cheng." "Ah!" He Yan jumped in fright and almost fell from the chair. She stood up in a hurry and knocked her foot on the table leg. She cried out in pain. Someone came to help her and said, "Are you okay?" He Yan opened her hands and grabbed randomly. She said, "Who is it?" He grabbed the corner of a person's clothes. That person comforted her kindly, "I am Yuan Baozhen. I am not a bad person. Young master, don't worry." He Yan calmed down and breathed a sigh of relief. She said with lingering fear, "So it is Imperial Censor Yuan. I thought it was those assassins again. I was scared to death. Why didn't you say anything when you came in?" "I am sorry, I am sorry. I did not expect to scare young master." Yuan Baozhen said with a smile, "I heard that young master is blind, so I came to see you." When he said this, although his tone was concerned and distressed, there was no smile on his face. He stared at He Yan's expression, as if he wanted to see whether He Yan was really blind or not. However, He Yan's eyes were covered with cloth and could not see anything. If one could not see a person's eyes, it would be difficult to see through their expressions. His head was leaning to the extreme. Normal people might not be able to notice this, but He Yan could clearly feel it. The person she grabbed was Ding Yi. Yuan Baozhen was greedy for life and afraid of accidents, so he would not go forward directly. However, his eyes were like maggots in a tarsal bone. It was hard to ignore. Even so, He Yan did not show it at all. She seemed to be a little distressed, but with a youthful indifference, she said, "Yes, I can't see now. However, uncle said that he would find a godly doctor to cure me, so it should only be temporary." It would have been better if she did not say this. Once she said this, it almost made people believe that she really could not see. This was because the title of godly doctor carried a kind of comforting and perfunctory meaning. It was used to coax children. Yuan Baozhen sat down on a chair next to her. He shook his head and sighed, "I did not expect young master to be injured on this trip." Fortunately, no life was harmed, and military governor Xiao is also fine. As he said this, he seemed to think of something. He looked at He Yan and asked in confusion, "Young master, last night at the banquet, how did you know that there was an assassin at that time and did not let the governor drink that cup of wine?" No one knew whether that cup of wine was poisonous or not. Therefore, Yuan Baozhen asked very coincidentally and did not mention the wine at all. He only said that there was an assassination. He Yan sneered in her heart. He was testing her. She raised her head, as if she did not know where Yuan Baozhen was. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I did not know there was an assassin at that time. I only saw a flying insect fly into uncle's wine cup." Ding Yi and Yuan Baozhen did not expect this answer. The two of them were stunned at the same time. Yuan Baozhen asked, "Flying insect?" "That's right, you don't know, but my uncle loves cleanliness," He Yan sighed. "If his clothes are stained with dust, he will immediately change them. If his shoes are stained with mud, he will never wear them a second time. There are flying insects in the wine cup. If he drank it, I don't know how angry he would be. At that time, I only wanted to remind him not to drink it and change the cup. Who knew that there would be an assassin? I was also shocked." So this was the reason. Yuan Baozhen was somewhat skeptical. At that time, Qing Lisu's scream was so shrill and anxious that it made his heart tighten. So this was the reason. But if it was not for this reason, how could he, a young master who did not know anything, predict the future and know that there was a problem with the wine? Perhaps it was really a coincidence that he had stumbled upon it? Yuan Baozhen did not know what to feel. Who would have known that a good game of chess would be ruined here? His heart was half angry and half suspicious. When he looked at Qing Lisu again, he only felt that this young man was annoying. But Qing Lisu clearly did not know how annoying he was. Instead, she seemed to be particularly close to Yuan Baozhen because he came to see him. She smiled and said, I heard from my uncle that Imperial Censor Yuan came from Shuajing. That's right. Then does Imperial Censor Yuan know General Fei Hong, He Rufei? She asked. When she said this, the room was silent for a moment. Ding Yi, who was very close to He Yan, placed his hand on the long sword at his waist. In an instant, a murderous aura rushed towards him. The young man did not make up his mind. With a smile on his face, he looked in Yuan Baozhen's direction and waited for his answer. After a moment, Yuan Baozhen stared at He Yan's face and asked, Little Gongzi, why did you suddenly ask about General Fei Hong? Doesn't everyone say that General Fei Hong and my uncle are sworn enemies, and that their skills and achievements are on par? I have never seen General Fei Hong before, so I don't know how his skills are, and I don't know how he looks. Since Imperial Censor Yuan came from Shuajing and is also an official of the same court, perhaps you have seen him before. I heard that he used to wear a mask. Now that he has taken off his mask, what do you think? Is he good looking? The Qing Li Su, in front of him, spoke in a light tone. She did not know that the bodyguard beside her had almost pulled out his sword and asked the same question as those naughty young men from Shuajing. Yuan Baozhen let out a sigh of relief. For a moment, he thought that this young man had discovered something and almost wanted to kill him. I have seen him before. He is born, very handsome. However, he cannot be compared to Military Governor Shao. Yuan Baozhen replied with a smile. Not as good as my uncle. He Yan was disappointed and quickly said, Then, is Imperial Censor Yuan close to General Fei Hong? If they are close, when I return to Shuajing in the future, can you introduce me to General Fei Hong? I have heard many of his deeds and want to see for myself what kind of person he is. She said in a small voice, but this matter must not be known by my uncle. I am afraid that he will punish me by making me copy books. Little Gongzi, I am afraid you will be disappointed. Yuan Baozhen shook his head and said, General Fei Hong and I only know each other and are not close. If you want to introduce me, it would be better to have Military Governor Shao introduce you to him. He Yan whispered, How would I dare to let him introduce me to him? As she said this, Yuan Baozhen looked at her and suddenly said, I came today because I was afraid that little Gongzi would be sad because of your eyes. But now that I have seen you, it seems that I worried too much. Little Gongzi does not seem to be very sad. He Yan asked curiously, Why does Imperial Censor Yuan say this? Last night, I cried for 2 whole hours. If it was not for my uncle scolding me and saying that he would throw me out if I did not shut up, you would not be able to see me now. Moreover, I later understood who I was. I was the young master of the right sector's Naolang residence. Although I didn't know anything, my uncle was the right army's commander-in-chief. As long as my uncle was around, I would definitely be able to see. My uncle said that there will be a godly doctor that can cure my eyes. There will definitely be a godly doctor that can cure my eyes. Her words were full of worship and trust towards Xiaoju. Yuan Baozhen was speechless and did not know what to say. He Yan's words were watertight and did not find any loopholes. But, he was still worried. Little Gongzi is right. Military Governor Shao is omnipotent and will definitely find a way. It seems that I was too narrow-minded. He smiled and stood up, since that is the case, I should also leave. Little Gongzi is not feeling well right now, you should go lie down on the bed. He looked around, why is there not a single servant in this room? I was the one who asked them to leave. He Yan smiled, after what happened last night, I do not dare to use the servants in this fu. Does Imperial Censor Yuan dare to use them? You are very brave. Yuan Baozhen smiled, but you cannot see right now. Do you need someone to serve you? Fei Nu will serve me. Moreover, I can find my way there. She smiled, Imperial Censor Yuan, do not worry. I can do it myself. Yuan Baozhen smiled, little Gongzi is clever. Then I will leave first. After saying this, he turned and left. But when he reached the door, he turned back and stood at the door without moving. In the room, Ding Yi did not move a single step. When the two of them came in, the one talking was Yuan Baozhen. Ding Yi did not speak. He Yan easily thought that there was only one person in the room. Yuan Baozhen stood at the door and gave Ding Yi a look. He Yan stood up and walked shakily into the room. Ding Yi was right in front of her. She could feel that there was an email piercer hidden in her sleeve. She had taken it from Ying Yu last night. She had already thought about how to dodge if Ding Yi attacked her. She also knew how to stab this email piercer into his heart. The young man's eyes were covered with cloth. He did not reach out to take it. She held on to the wall and slowly walked into the room. The people in the room were probably afraid that she would trip because of her inconvenience, so they moved all the chairs to the side. From the table to the bed, there was nothing. She only needed to hold on to the wall and feel her way through. He Yan did the same. She walked until she was close to the bed. Ding Yi bent down and placed a stool in front of her. The young man did not feel anything and took a step forward. With a clang, he tripped and fell forward. He fell at a bad time and hit the edge of the bed. He screamed and his forehead immediately became swollen. He fell to the ground. Half of his body was on the ground and his hand was scraped. He did not get up for a long time. Ding Yi shook his head at Yuan Baozhen. Yuan Baozhen saw this and turned to leave. Ding Yi also quietly followed him. He Yan was the only one left in the room. He Yan covered his head and screamed in pain. No one saw, but she sneered. Chapter 97. He Yan did not sit up immediately. Instead, she held her head and groaned. She was thinking about something else. Yuan Baozhen was really here to test her. First, he wanted to know how she found out about the wine. Second, he wanted to see if she was really blind. This person was very meticulous. He even asked Ding Yi to put a stool there to see her reaction. If He Yan's response wasn't right in the slightest, this pair of master and servant would have other thoughts. She had excellent hearing and heard Ding Yi's movements. She also knew that Yuan Baozhen did not leave immediately. That was why she was here to cooperate with them and act out what Yuan Baozhen wanted to see. But Yuan Baozhen was testing her. Wasn't she also testing Yuan Baozhen? They obviously had a close relationship, but she insisted that they only knew each other. He Rufei's servant, Ding Yi, would not follow him here. There was indeed something wrong with the wine. But what puzzled He Yan the most was what role He Rufei played in this matter. Did he and Yuan Baozhen conspire to murder Xiaoju? Or was it He Rufei who instigated it? Or were they working for someone else? Next, she had to follow Ding Yi and find out what the two of them were up to. There was no movement outside. He Yan's "io, io" became louder. There was movement behind her. It was Fei Nu's voice. He asked, "What happened to you?" "I hurt my head just now." He Yan blankly reached out to grab him. "Brother Fei Nu, come and help me. I sprained my ankle." Slave Fei answered and went forward to help her onto the couch. He Yan's eyes were covered with a cloth. Therefore, Fei Nu could not see her emotions from her eyes. Naturally, he did not know what He Yan was thinking. In fact, the act just now was not only for Yuan Baozhen, but also for Fei Nu. Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi were so focused on testing He Yan that they didn't notice that Fei Nu had been standing at the door and listening to what was going on inside. They did not notice, but He Yan did. Fei Nu only ordered people to remove the bowls and plates. Why did he leave for so long? It was nothing more than the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. He Yan didn't know why, but he always felt that Xiaoju and Fei Nu didn't trust her. This wasn't a big deal. Of course, they wouldn't trust someone they didn't know. However, she sensed that not only did Xiaoju not trust her, but she was also wary and suspicious of her. He Yan was also confused. She didn't think she had done anything that would make people suspicious. Now that she was here, she didn't even have any interactions with Yuan Baozhen in the past. She didn't know why she was suspected. Forget it, if they were suspicious, then so be it. One act was enough to deceive two people. He Yan said, Brother Fei Nu, where did you go just now? That imperial censor Yuan came to sit for a while, but you didn't see him. Fei Nu avoided her question and only asked, how's your head? He Yan touched her head and said, it's swollen. I don't know when it'll go away. She sighed heavily again, this is really a trap. I think that little brother of mine is quite smart. It's right that he didn't come. This is much more dangerous than being forced into a marriage. If Qing Lisu was here, she wouldn't know what would happen. Sit down and rest for a while. Fei Nu's voice was emotionless, I'll be at the door. Call me if you need anything. He left again. He Yan lay on the bed. She was covered with a cloth, so Fei Nu couldn't see her expression. She also couldn't see Fei Nu's reaction. She thought that he was expressionless. She didn't know when Xiaoju would come back. By the time Xiaoju came back, it was already late at night. On this day, He Yan and Fei Nu stayed in the Sun residence and didn't do anything. The wine and dishes that Sun Xiangfu sent over had to be tested for poison with silver needles. Because He Yan couldn't see, she simply slept in the room for the whole day. Fei Nu also stood guard at the door for the whole day. When Xiaoju came back, Fei Nu, who was sleeping on the bed, immediately woke up. He got up and walked to Xiaoju's side, saying, Young master. Xiaoju indicated for him to follow her into the room. Fei Nu glanced at He Yan on the bed. Under the dim light, she was sleeping soundly. When Fei Nu and He Yan entered the room, they didn't see the youth sleeping soundly on the bed. Her hands were gently tapping the mattress under her body. He Yan obviously wasn't asleep. After sleeping for the whole day, how could she continue to sleep at night? She wasn't a pig raised in the village. Second young master Xiao obviously had something to say to his confidant. She guessed that Fei Nu would also tell this commander-in-chief everything that happened here today. He Yan didn't have the guts to listen to the master and servant whispering to each other. Xiaoju wasn't Yuan Baozhen. She knew real martial arts. Once she exposed herself, there would be too much trouble and the losses would outweigh the gains. However, she could imagine what Fei Nu would say to her. He Yan felt that she could fool Fei Nu with her acting today. As for whether she could fool Xiaoju, she didn't know. In the room, the lamp was lit. Xiaoju placed her sword on the table and sat down on the chair in front of the table. Young master, Yuan Baozhen came by today. Fei Nu said. Xiaoju looked up and asked, what's the matter? From what I can see, he came specially to look for He Yan. Yuan Baozhen said a few words to He Yan. He recounted the conversation between Yuan Baozhen and He Yan to Xiaoju. In the end, he said, Yuan Baozhen seemed to be testing He Yan. Xiaoju pondered for a moment and asked, what do you think? From He Yan's answer, it seems that he doesn't know Yuan Baozhen. There were no flaws. However, it could also be that the two of them were acting together. Overall, He Yan's suspicions can be cleared for the time being. Cleared? Xiaoju curled his lips into a smile and said, Slave Fei, the liar in our house has even deceived you. Fei Nu was startled and didn't understand. Don't forget, when He Yan competed with Wang Ba in archery, she once blindfolded herself and shot a bird in the sky. Do you think that someone with such good hearing wouldn't be able to tell that Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard placed a stool in front of her? Young master, you mean, he could have avoided the stool, but he still fell. Firstly, he deceived Yuan Baozhen, and secondly, he deceived you. Xiaoju said casually, this person is very good at deceiving people. What was a blind person like? Stumbling and panicking, when there was no one around, they couldn't do anything. They were very pitiful. This was the impression that ordinary people had of a blind person. Yuan Baozhen and Fei Nu were ordinary people. Naturally, they would think the same. Seeing He Yan fall and be helpless, it was exactly what a blind person would look like. But He Yan was not an ordinary blind person. Even if she was blindfolded, she could still shoot better than other people. Yuan Baozhen had never seen He Yan shoot an arrow while blindfolded, but Fei Nu had seen it before. Even so, even he overlooked this point. Deceiving you is secondary. The person he wanted to deceive the most was Yuan Baozhen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said that there were flying insects in the wine. There were flying insects in the wine. How could this be possible? It was not summer now, and the Sun residents paid special attention to this. There were wormwood sachets everywhere to prevent insects from flying into the wine. It was not easy for He Yan to think that there were flying insects in the wine. Young master, is he Yuan Baozhen's man? Fei Nu also didn't understand. If he was Yuan Baozhen's man, why did he have to be so suspicious? He doesn't look like it, but I can't say for sure. There was a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table. Sun Xiangfu had specially arranged it. He didn't like these things, but he liked to pretend to be cultured. Xiao Zhu found a brush and paper and wrote a few words. His handwriting was elegant and strong. It was very beautiful. When it landed on the paper, it was as bright as a person's. I want you to bring a letter to Lin Shuanghe. Young Master Lin. Fei Nu's calm face finally showed a surprised expression. Young Master, didn't you not allow young Master Lin to come to Liangzhou? He suddenly thought of something and said in disbelief, could it be He Yan? The handwriting quickly dried in the wind. He put the letter into the envelope and looked down. It's for him, but not entirely for him. Fei Nu didn't ask any more questions. He put the letter away and tiptoed out. Xiao Zhu saw this and laughed. Why are you so careful? The people outside have already woken up. He said. Young master. Fei Nu was stunned. Forget it. When it comes to deceiving people, you are no match for him. Xiao Zhu shook his head and said lazily, in any case, he doesn't have the guts to come in. Fei Nu stood in place and thought for a while before leaving the room. After he left, Xiao Zhu flicked the wick of the lamp. In the light, his eyes were bright and oppressive. Su Jingfu, the night swallowed his whispers. When He Yan woke up, Xiao Zhu was already gone. He seemed to be very busy these 2 days. When He Yan woke up, he had already left. When he came back, He Yan was already asleep. They didn't even see each other. She guessed that what Xiao Zhu was doing was related to what happened at the banquet at the Sun residence. However, she couldn't go with him and could only sit here and wait. But she didn't want to sit here and wait. Fortunately, after noon, when it was almost evening, Slave Fei also went out for some matters. Before he left, he reminded her to stay in the room and not go out to avoid trouble. He Yan nodded in agreement. In fact, He Yan thought that the Sun residence was not as murderous as Fei Nu said. From what happened at the banquet, it could be seen that the assassin's target was only Xiao Zhu. Since Xiao Zhu wasn't around, the manor was 70% safer. The remaining 30% might not be able to defeat her. This morning, He Yan took off the cloth covering his eyes. It was because the cloth had been used for 2 days and needed a new one. However, the physician in the residence was scared away by Xiao Zhu last time and there was no one to make a new cloth for He Yan. Although he took off the cloth, after 2 days, everyone in the residence believed that He Yan was blind and didn't treat him as an ordinary person. He Yan was the only one. When she took off the cloth, she felt that the sky was too bright and she still felt uncomfortable. Yesterday morning, when she took off the cloth in front of Fei Nu, her expression didn't change. God knows how much she wanted to cry at that time, it was too dazzling. In fact, He Yan had never been blind. That day at the banquet, the manservant who received Ding Yi's order had indeed thrown a handful of powder-like things at him. She blocked it, and at that time, her eyes did hurt. After all, she had been blind once before and her eyes were more sensitive than ordinary people. Subconsciously, she felt that her vision was blurry and she suspected that she was going blind. But when she calmed down, she felt that she had actually avoided it. At night, when there was no one around, Yen secretly took off the cloth and she could see the light of the lanterns outside. It was just a mistake because she was too nervous. She originally wanted to explain the next day, but when the next day really came, she changed her mind. A blind person shouldn't be a threat. It was much easier to be a non-threatening person and get close to Yuan Baozhen than to be smart enough to discover the poison in the wine, young Master Cheng. So when she took off the cloth in front of Fei Nu, Yen didn't show the slightest bit of abnormality. She had been a blind person for a long time. She could imitate all the reactions a blind person should have, and no one could find anything wrong with it. But she didn't expect that Yuan Baozhen would be so cautious and especially come to confirm whether she was really blind or not. Because of this, Yen was in a difficult position. But at the same time, she was even more certain that Rufei, Ding Yi, and Yuan Baozhen had something going on. Rufei must have been involved in the murder of Xiao Ju. Although she didn't know what kind of grudge Rufei had with Xiao Ju, the enemy of an enemy was a friend. Now, she and Xiao Ju were on the same side. She had to find out what Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi wanted to do. Yen tied up her hair and quietly went out. Everyone knew that young Master Cheng couldn't see. Other than going to the toilet, he stayed in his room every day. Moreover, these days, everyone in the residence was in danger. Sun Xiangfu was busy cleaning himself, so Yen didn't have anyone to care about her. Luckily, she had a good memory. On the first day she came to the Sun residence, she already knew the way to the Sun residence. But Yen didn't know where Yuan Baozhen lived. Just as she was in a dilemma, she saw someone walking quickly through the garden. It was none other than Ding Yi. Good timing. Yen praised her in her heart and quickly followed her. She moved very quickly and was used to finding a room to hide. Of course, because the Sun residence was luxurious, there were rockery and bonsai everywhere, giving her many places to hide. Along the way, no one discovered her. Finally, Ding Yi stopped in front of a room and pushed the door open to enter. For some reason, the room Yuan Baozhen lived in was very far away from the main hall. It was almost remote and there weren't many people around. It was autumn. In the evening of Liangzhou, the sky was already dark. Yen estimated for a moment and jumped onto the roof. She was small and thin. The roof had sharp corners and cornices, and there were carved stones everywhere. Yen lay on the roof and almost merged with it. She carefully searched for a long time and finally found a gap. She didn't know if it was because of the rain or the hail, but the fragile crystal roof was broken and there was just a gap. Yen put her face close to it and listened to the movement inside. Ding Yi walked into the room. "How is it?" Yuan Baozhen asked. Ding Yi shook her head. "I lost him." "You weren't discovered by him, right?" "No." Ding Yi hesitated. "I didn't dare to get too close in case he discovered me. He left early today and went to the east of the city. I looked for him in the vicinity but couldn't find him." Yuan Baozhen's expression was uncertain. "This Xiao Ju, what is she trying to do?" "She clearly got into trouble in the Sun mansion, but she wants to stay in the mansion and go out every day. I don't know what she's doing. I keep feeling that something is wrong." Yen heard this and became suspicious. "Did Yuan Baozhen ask Ding Yi to follow Xiao Ju? Has the Yamen matter been settled?" Yuan Baozhen asked. "Yingyue and the others are dead. There's no evidence. The spy in the mansion is also dead. Since Sun Xiangfu was notified in advance, there shouldn't be any problems." Ding Yi paused. "I still don't understand. How did Qing Lisu know about the spy's movements?" He was also the one who discovered the cup of wine. You think there's something wrong with him? But you saw it yesterday. He can't see. He's just an ordinary young man. Even so, I still feel that something is wrong. Ding Yi couldn't put his finger on it. That young man should be blind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to act so well. The servants in the mansion also said that he stayed in his room all day and was guarded by Xiao Zhu's bodyguards. From the looks of it, he really did look like a weak rich young master. However, Ding Yi still remembered that during the banquet, Qing Lisu had looked at him. That gaze was fleeting, as if he had just glanced at someone else. However, at that moment, Ding Yi seemed to have felt the shock and anger in the young man's eyes. When he looked again, the young man had already looked away. It was as if what he saw was just an illusion. But was it really an illusion? Their conversation was lively, but He Yan's heart was filled with shock as he listened. Ying Yue is dead. There's no evidence. She told Sun Xiangfu. This meant that the assassination of Xiao Zhu was indeed done by Yuan Baozhen. Perhaps Sun Xiangfu had even helped him. Now that Xiao Zhu was still living here, wouldn't it lead others to continue to harm her? As she was thinking, she heard Yuan Baozhen ask, "Has brother He sent you any letters recently?" He Yan thought that this brother He was most likely referring to He Rufei. No. Before master left, he told me that I must succeed this time. Ding Yi said, "If I fail, I won't be able to answer to Prime Minister Su." Prime Minister Su? He Yan's heart skipped a beat. He Rufei asked Ding Yi to assassinate Xiao Zhu because he wanted to answer to Prime Minister Su. In other words, He Rufei was working for Prime Minister Su. But who was Prime Minister Su? She knew the current Prime Minister, Su Jingfu, but she didn't know if he was the Prime Minister Su that Ding Yi mentioned. We've already failed. Yuan Baozhen was half angry and half disheartened. I didn't expect Xiao Zhu to be so difficult to deal with. Now he's starting to suspect me. I don't know if I'll have another chance in the future. Xiao Zhu is difficult to deal with, but he still has a blind nephew. Ding Yi said, "Since this person is blind and doesn't know anything, I think we can use him." What do you want to do? Yuan Baozhen asked. Don't forget what I used to do. Ding Yi said, I have my ways. Before he could finish, he heard a creaking sound above his head. A small piece of green fell. Ding Yi's expression changed. Who's there? He jumped out. Under the moonlight, someone's figure flitted past like a swallow. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared into the night. He Yan complained in her heart. Sun Xiangfu pretended to be cultured. Even the roof tiles were made of green crystal tiles. It looked good, but it was very fragile. Even a weak person like her would accidentally collapse if she leaned on it. What kind of logic was this? He Yan suspected that Sun Xiangfu was pretending to be weak. The purpose of using these tiles was so that no one could eavesdrop from the roof. If it was a normal man, he would have fallen down as soon as he leaned on the roof. Ding Yi was still chasing in the distance, but for some reason, he didn't call out to the servants of the Sun family to catch the assassin. Perhaps he was hiding something. He Yan was familiar with the roads here. She hid left and right, thinking about the conversation she overheard. Yuan Baozhen came to Liangzhou, Ding Yi came to Liangzhou, and He Rufei came to Shuajing. They all had one goal, which was to assassinate Xiao Zhu. And the three of them had to answer to Prime Minister Su. Now, Xiao Zhu was alive and well. All the men of sacrifice were killed. Yuan Baozhen was not satisfied and wanted to come again. Moreover, Ding Yi had his eyes on her, the blind and useless person. He wanted to use her, the blind person, to kill Xiao Zhu. No matter how she thought about it, when one person used another person, it was nothing more than instigating a rebellion, holding her hostage, or being a weapon. Qing Lisu and Xiao Zhu were uncle and nephew. Yuan Baozhen probably wouldn't think of instigating a rebellion. So, there were only two possibilities left. He Yan was holding her hostage. First, He Yan didn't think that Ding Yi could defeat her. Second, she wasn't the real Qing Li Su. Xiao Ju probably wouldn't do something so stupid as to surrender for the sake of her nephew. As for the third possibility, being a weapon, they forgot the most important thing. He Yan was not blind. She had been on guard against Ding Yi since a long time ago. While she was thinking about this, He Yan had already seen the house she lived in. The lights were on. Fei Nu probably came back. He Yan felt around her body. She put the cloth in the room. She thought about how she still had to act for Fei Nu later and felt a headache coming on. She was afraid that Ding Yi would catch up with her. She jumped forward and entered the room at lightning speed. When she turned around, she almost choked on her own saliva. There was a wooden bath in the room. Xiao Ju was sitting in the middle of the bath. The beauty was bathing. His skin was ice cold and his bones were jade white. The moonlight slipped in through the cracks in the window. His black hair was covered with a layer of cold and clear color. He looked particularly attractive. His shoulder blades were very beautiful. For a moment, He Yan's mind drifted elsewhere. She thought, when was the last time she saw this person take off his outer clothes in the Xian Chang Pavilion? The men in the army were mostly tough and rough. Su Zhiheng was probably considered gentle. However, Xiao Ju was different from them. He was handsome and strong. His waist was especially attractive. No matter if it was a man or a woman, they would all praise him when they saw him. It turned out that this person was not only good-looking, but his body was also different from ordinary people. No wonder he was called Commander Jade-Faced. He lived up to his name. The fog made it difficult to see his expression. Xiao Ju probably didn't expect that someone would suddenly barge in at this time. She immediately stood up, and with a splash, the sound of water was clear and crisp. He Yan. This time it was over. He Yan saw everything he should and should not see. At this moment, she was cursing herself in her heart. Why did she wear a cloth every day when she went out? Why didn't she wear it today? Or perhaps it would be better if she could not see. Second young master Xiao quickly picked up the clothes on the shelf and put them on. He looked at her coldly. The room seemed to have become colder. He was about to speak when he saw the young man in front of him open his hand and close the door. His eyes were calm and seemed to widen. However, nothing was reflected in his eyes. He said, Who is it? Ha! Second young master Xiao laughed at this clumsy acting. Chapter 98. Uncle? Are you uncle? He Yan revealed a surprised expression. Like a blind man touching an elephant, he opened his hands and scratched wildly. Where are you? Xiao Ju coldly looked at him acting and mocked. Don't you know how to shoot arrows blindfolded and identify people by their sounds? What, can't you tell where I am? He Yan's movements suddenly stopped. After a moment, he smiled embarrassedly. I was afraid that you would feel awkward. Uncle, are you bathing? The youth opened his eyes and stared unblinkingly in front of him. Even though he had already put on his clothes, Xiao Ju still felt uncomfortable. Where did you go just now? He asked. The latrine. Brother Fei Nu went out. I didn't dare to trust the servants here, so I went out to relax. Uncle, why are you back so early today? He Yan asked. Brother Fei Nu hasn't come back yet. Xiao Ju turned sideways and put on his outer clothes, saying, Don't run around here. He Yan looked at him and thought about the conversation between Yuan Baozhen and his servant. He said, Uncle, have you been investigating the assassination at the banquet these past few days? Did you find anything? Xiao Ju glanced at him and asked, What are you trying to say? You say. Is it possible that someone from this residence harmed you? You see, even though Magistrate Sun said that he didn't know anything, the incident happened in his residence. How could he not know anything? That doesn't make sense, right? There's also Imperial Censor Yuan. He Yan racked his brains and hinted, I think he's very strange. Oh, what's strange about him? Xiao Zhu asked. He Yan didn't know how to answer this question. He couldn't say that he went up to the roof and eavesdropped on their conversation. Furthermore, he was blinded by his bodyguard in his previous life. He Yan could only say, Imperial Censor Yuan came to find me once and asked me some strange questions. If you want me to answer, I can only say that my intuition is wrong. Uncle, you should be wary of them. The young man groped for a chair and sat down. He spoke in a serious tone, which surprised Xiao Zhu. He slowly asked, You want me to be wary of Yuan Baozhen? That's right. Think about it. If they really did harm to you, they would definitely do it again. Uncle, you are usually not in the mansion, so you don't have to worry. But that's not right, you are usually not in the mansion, so why are you still living here? He Yan suddenly thought of something. Since he had to live in the Sun residence, he had to go out every day. Wasn't this contradictory? You should spend more time on your eyes instead of worrying about these things, Xiao Zhu said calmly. Are you really blind? He Yan's heart skipped a beat. He played dumb and said, Of course. What good would it do me to pretend to be blind? Her words were powerful and resonant. Xiao Zhu looked at her again and felt that all her actions were like that of a real blind person. If she was really pretending, then she was really too powerful. However, this person was used to lying. Otherwise, she wouldn't have even fooled Fei Nu. He Yan saw that Xiao Zhu didn't say anything and was afraid that he would continue to talk about this topic. He smiled and said, Uncle, weren't you bathing just now? Did I disturb you by coming in? Do you want to continue? You can continue. I will guard the door. I can guarantee that no one will come in and no one else will be able to come in. After saying this, he groped for the door and opened it. He went out and sat on the steps outside. He guarded the door like a door god. Xiao Zhu, He Yan didn't listen to the movements in the room. He didn't know if second young master Xiao was in the mood to continue bathing. In any case, He Yan's mind was in a mess. Too many things had happened today. He didn't know what to think about first. He Rufei, Prime Minister Su, Yuan Baozhen, and Ding Yi's conspiracy were mixed together. In the end, it looked like Xiao Zhu was bathing. Ba ba ba, He Yan scolded. He thought that even if this person wasn't blind, after all this, he would probably become blind. Although she was a woman, when she thought about it carefully, she didn't know who had taken advantage of who. It was about the same. The next morning, Xiao Zhu disappeared again. After Fei Nu came to bring her food, she also disappeared. He Yan didn't know what the master and servant were doing every day. He Yan sat on the bed and wondered if he should sneak out to follow Yuan Baozhen and his bodyguards. However, after what happened last night, Yuan Baozhen would definitely keep a close eye on the roof. The roof of the Sun family was fragile and it was not suitable for him to climb it again and again. Who knew that before He Yan could come to a conclusion, Ding Yi came to his door. He stood at the door and said respectfully, Young Master Cheng. He Yan looked up. Ding Yi's voice was respectful and polite. Lord Yuan invites you to have tea. What kind of tea? He Yan asked casually. I'm quite picky about my tea. We have all kinds of tea. Ding Yi smiled. If young Master Cheng doesn't want to, I'm willing. He Yan supported himself on the bed and stood up. I'm really bored here alone. It's rare that Lord Yuan remembers me and accompanies me to relieve my boredom. How can I be so unappreciative? Lead the way. She still had a cloth wrapped around her eyes. Please bring me my bamboo stick. Last night, when Fei Nu came back, he brought back a bamboo stick for He Yan. It was neither too tall nor too short. He Yan could use it to walk. Although this person looked taciturn, he was actually very considerate. After all, the people in the Sun residence could not be trusted and no one could use them. However, it was really inconvenient for her to walk by herself. It was much better to have a bamboo stick. In the eyes of others, she would look more like a blind person. Ding Yi said, "Okay." He looked sideways and saw a bamboo stick on the table in front of him. He walked over and took the bamboo stick in his hand. As he walked in front of He Yan, he handed it over and said, "Young Master Cheng, please take it." He Yan shakily reached out to take it. Just as she was about to touch the bamboo stick, Ding Yi suddenly withdrew his hand. He Yan's body fell into the air. She was already unsteady on her feet, so her body tilted and she almost fell. Fortunately, she was supported by Ding Yi. Ding Yi said, "Are you alright, young Master Cheng?" "I'm fine." He Yan said with lingering fear, "I almost fell." Then, she said in a sad tone, "I can't even carry things now. It's all my fault." Ding Yi said with guilt, "I should have directly handed it to young Master Cheng. I caused you to be frightened." Although he said this, his eyes were fixed on He Yan, trying to find a flaw in He Yan's face. Unfortunately, once both eyes were covered by the cloth, it was really difficult to guess the changes in He Yan's expression. He also did not know. He Yan looked at the person in front of her and sneered silently in her heart. She had changed the cloth last night. It was a black cloth. She used a needle to make a very small gap near the eyes. It was not much, just a small gap. Through this small gap, she could see the movements of the person outside. In the eyes of an outsider, He Yan was just a blind person whose eyes were covered by the cloth. He Yan saw Ding Yi's probing and the way he stared at her face. She did not expect that Ding Yi was still suspicious of her. But why? Last night, she had escaped extremely quickly, so Ding Yi shouldn't have discovered any clues. If she had reminded Xiaoju not to drink the wine at the banquet, then the last time Yuan Baozhen came over, the probing should have ended. Why did he keep probing her like this? He Yan could not figure out the reason. She leaned on the bamboo stick and said, "Forget it. It's none of your business. Let's go." "Let me help you," Ding Yi said. "No need," He Yan said, "if I really can't see anymore, I will have to get used to this kind of life sooner or later. Why do I always need help? Besides, I have the bamboo stick. It's just that I walk slower. I can still keep up. You can just tell me where to go." The young man's voice was stubborn. It sounded like he was competitive even if he was blind. Ding Yi did not find any loopholes. She said, "Then please follow me, young Master Cheng." He walked forward. As he walked, he told He Yan where there were steps and where to turn left or right. He Yan actually walked very slowly. The bamboo stick tapped on the ground, making a duck 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 sound. He was very careful. He walked seriously. Ding Yi was also very patient. He kept guiding her. However, He Yan could see from the corner of his eyes that this person was staring at her every tiny movement. He was still trying to find any loopholes that she might make. If she was pretending to be blind, she would more or less show some common habits when walking. People who were close to her would be able to notice that something was wrong if they paid more attention. However, He Yan had come prepared. She was wearing a cloth. He could remember the days when she was in the Su family. She had also been blind before. There was no need for her to pretend. She just had to act like she did in the past. Of the two of them, one was pretending to be blind and the other was observing. They were both on guard against each other. In the end, the one who was pretending to be blind was more skillful. They walked and stopped and did not reveal any loopholes. They had already arrived at the gate of Yuanbao town. Ding Yi said, "Young Master Cheng, be careful of the steps. We are here." He Yan tapped on the bamboo stick. Following the guidance of the bamboo stick, he walked up the steps shakily and followed Ding Yi inside. The room that Yuan Baozhen lived in was on the side of the shade. It seemed that it was very difficult to see sunlight on normal days. The moment she entered, she felt that it was dark. There was even a lamp during the day. There was a teapot on the small table. There were a few teacups and a plate of snacks. Ding Yi led her to sit down in front of the small table. Yuan Baozhen raised his head and smiled at He Yan kindly. How have you been these days, young Master Cheng? Not bad, not bad. He Yan pointed at his eyes. Except for here. Haven't you gotten better these days? No. He Yan sighed. I don't know when the miraculous doctor uncle found will arrive in Liangzhou. Yuan Baozhen did not take this to heart. He just looked at Ding Yi. Ding Yi shook his head at him. He meant that he did not find any loopholes along the way. That meant that he was really blind. When he looked at He Yan was also looking at him. The gaps in the black cloth were blurry. He Yan could not see clearly. However, he felt that this person was different from the person he saw a few days ago. He Yan's voice was still very kind. However, probably because he could not see, he did not even bother to pretend to smile. His expression showed that he was anxious. It seemed that something was not going well. That's right. They came here specifically to murder Xiaoju, but they did not succeed. Now, they did not even see a trace of Xiaoju every day. It was not going well at all. Yuan Baozhen pushed the teacup in front of He Yan. Then, he placed the plate of snacks in front of He Yan. He smiled and said, "Have some snacks." He Yan could clearly see that there were some peanuts sprinkled on top of the snacks. He Yan still remembered Cheng Li Su's advice before he left. As long as he ate peanuts, he would get a rash all over his body. That was interesting. Did Yuan Baozhen know that Cheng Li Su could not eat peanuts? He Yan felt that there was a high chance that he knew. Then, the purpose of this plate of snacks was very clear. He was still testing her. There was a problem if she did not get a rash after eating this plate of snacks. There was a problem if she did not eat this plate of snacks. He Yan thought that he was worthy of being tested by Yuan Baozhen again and again. She did not take the cup of tea or the snacks. Instead, she smiled and said in a strange tone, "Lord Yuan, I can't really drink tea and eat snacks." Yuan Baozhen's eyes moved. Why? After you found out about the banquet, my uncle did not let me eat or drink in the residence. Every day, my food is delivered by slave Fei. Lord Yuan, it's not that I don't trust you, but it's because my uncle is a very strict person. If I eat behind his back and get angry, I can't bear the consequences. The young man's tone was very matter-of-fact. He even did not understand why Yuan Baozhen was so stupid. He said, I advise Lord Yuan not to eat the food in the residence. Endure the desire for good food. Do not lose your life because of it. The young man's reply was very fast. There was no clue at all. For a moment, it was hard to tell whether he was telling the truth or lying. Yuan Baozhen smiled. The tea and snacks here are also bought by your servant outside. The food outside is even more dangerous. He Yan said earnestly, if it is really not possible, Lord Yuan, please wait. When my uncle returns to the residence, you can talk to him. Once you have my uncle's approval, I will eat these things, okay? Yuan Baozhen did not know how to respond. Inviting Xiaoju over to eat tea. Wouldn't that be exposing himself? He Yan felt that his words were flawless. Cheng Li Su was a little coward who was scared to death of her uncle. Yuan Baozhen took back his hand and shook his head with a smile. If Qin Gongzi does not want to eat, then don't eat. His tone was very disappointed. It is fine. I came to sit with Lord Yuan. It is also good. Then, there is something I am very curious about. Yuan Baozhen looked at the young man in front of him and changed the topic. Military Governor Xiao cares for you so much. Why did he leave you alone in the Fu these past few days? There is only that bodyguard by your side. Even if it is a bodyguard, he is not always with Qin Gongzi. If there is a problem in the Fu, does Military Governor Xiao not worry that Qin Gongzi will be in danger? When these words were said, He Yan was enlightened. He suddenly understood why Yuan Baozhen and his servant would not let him go. Because Xiao Ju left her nephew alone in the Sun Fu. This was not a reasonable thing to do. The reason Xiao Ju did this was because He Yan knew martial arts. Secondly, she was not the real Qing Li Su. She did not have any blood relations with Xiao Ju. The cold second young master Xiao would not treat her differently. But in reality, if the real Qing Li Su was here, Xiao Ju would definitely think of a way to ensure his safety. Unlike now, where He Yan was left alone in the Sun Manor. Her entire body was written from head to toe as if she was an abandoned concubine who was disliked and banished to the cold palace. He Yan always knew his place. Therefore, he did not feel anything was wrong. But in the eyes of others, it was wrong. She suddenly realized that this was the reason why Yuan Baozhen and his servant felt something was wrong and stared at her. But Xiao Ju was such a smart person. How could she not have thought of this? He Yan felt that it was impossible. When they were in the Xianchang Hall, He Yan was careless. Xiao Ju was very cautious. He Yan did not believe that Xiao Ju would be careless. Then, there was only one possibility. Xiao Ju deliberately made her reveal her flaws. She made Yuan Baozhen and his servant suspicious of her and tested her again and again. But why? Even if Xiao Ju was suspicious of her, at least for now, they should be working together. Could it be, this bastard was using her as a shield? She attracted the attention of Yuan Baozhen and his servant so that Xiao Ju would have time to do his own thing. The more He Yan thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He wanted to tear Xiao Ju into pieces. But she did not show it on her face. She only said innocently, "What danger could there be? My uncle already said that the real danger is not in this Fu. I am very safe in this Fu. Lord Yuan, let me tell you." She said in a small voice, "The real danger is outside the Fu." Outside the Fu? Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi looked at each other. Then, Yuan Baozhen asked He Yan, "What does Qin Gongzi mean?" "I don't know." He Yan spread out his hands as if it had nothing to do with him. "In any case, that is what I overheard my uncle say. If you want to know, you can ask my uncle directly." She added, "I saw that he was outside the Fu these days. Maybe he went to deal with that danger." Fine. Since Xiao Ju was using her as a shield, she would kick the target back and draw Yuan Baozhen's attention to the outside of the Fu. Moreover, her image as a useless Gongzi who did not know anything was deeply ingrained in people's minds. Presumably, Yuan Baozhen did not find any flaws. Qin Gongzi really knows how to joke. Yuan Baozhen laughed. "Since this is Military Governor Zhao's private matter, I won't ask." He changed the topic. He Yan's entire body trembled. She saw Ding Yi walk over and lean close to her. He bent down and untied a fragrant ball from her waist. Qing Li was a very particular young master. He had countless fragrant pouches and jade pendants. He Yan felt that those things were too expensive and was afraid of losing them. After rummaging for a long time, he finally found a simple fragrant ball. The fragrant ball was only the size of 2 fingers. It was a small ball woven from wisteria. It was hollow in the middle and filled with spices and herbs. When worn at the waist, it gave off a faint fragrance. It was both cute and elegant. Ding Yi held the fragrant ball in his hand. His movements were very light, almost imperceptible. He Yan, who could not see, could only pretend that she did not notice. She did not think that Ding Yi stole the fragrant ball because he liked it. As expected, Ding Yi opened the top of the fragrant ball, took out the original herbs, put them away, and filled it with something else. It could not be anything good. After doing all this, he gently tied the fragrant ball back to He Yan's waist. From beginning to end, He Yan did not move at all. Yuan Baozhen's face revealed a satisfied expression. Ding Yi returned to Yuan Baozhen's side. From the outside, everything looked normal. It was as if nothing had happened. He Yan chatted with Yuan Baozhen about the past in the capital. She felt the fragrant ball at her waist heat up. In her previous life, she had been poisoned. He Yan suspected that perhaps Ding Yi was good at using poisons. She still remembered what she heard when she went to Yuan Baozhen's room last night. They wanted to use her to make trouble for Xiao Zhu. This was probably their plan. This thing was probably poisonous. The toxicity was not small. If she wore it, she would die. Xiao Zhu, who was close to her, would also die if she smelled it. Even Fei Nu would not be able to escape. In this way, the family of three, no, the master and servant, would really die. They could blame it all on the assassin. Perhaps when the coroner came to do an autopsy and found that she was not the real Qing Li Su, the assassin would pretend to be Qing Li Su and secretly kill the right army commander. He Yan shivered. She could not let this happen. She said, "Lord Yuan, I need to go to the toilet." "I want to go to the toilet first." Xiao Zhu walked into the Sun residence. Fei Nu followed closely behind him. It seemed that he had been waiting for him for a long time. "Young master," Yuan Baozhen asked He Yan to leave. He said. Xiao Zhu put his sword on the table and turned around. He said casually, "They are probably still probing. If they can't find young master, they can only start with He Yan." Xiao Zhu smiled noncommittally. He Yan was originally a shield that he had sent out to create a diversion. Without two tails, it would be more convenient for him to do things. Everyone thought that he had left the residence. In fact, today was the only day he left the residence. He had been in the Sun residence, hiding in the dark. It was just that no one noticed. "Young master, will He Yan find out what you did?" "He should have already found out. But, he can only lie." Xiao Zhu said, "This person has been lying since the first time he met Yuan Baozhen, although I don't know why." He Yan dealt with it well. The better he dealt with it, the harder it was to find any flaws and the more suspicious Yuan Baozhen would be. Because Xiao Zhu had left his nephew in the Sun residence, this was a matter full of flaws. Young master used Yuan Baozhen to test He Yan and used He Yan to test Yuan Baozhen. But what if they are in cahoots? Up until now, other than the assassination attempt at the Sun residence's banquet, Xiao Zhu had stayed out of it. He Yan and Yuan Baozhen were testing each other. This was the perfect opportunity to find out the origins of the two people. It was killing two birds with one stone. If they are in cahoots, then we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Xiao Zhu said calmly, originally, this matter was going to end soon. Fei Nu was silent. After a moment, he seemed to have thought of something and said, He Yan went to Yuan Baozhen's room today. Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard changed the incense ball that He Yan was wearing. Xiao Zhu raised his eyebrows, he didn't notice. No. It was just an act. I'm afraid that the incense ball is poisonous. Commander-in-Chief, you should stay away from him today. Xiao Zhu looked out of the window and suddenly said, He Yan should be back at this time. What is he doing outside? Just as he finished speaking, he heard a servant from the Sun residence running in breathlessly. As she ran, she said, It's not good, it's not good. Fei Nu opened the door, What's not good? The servant stammered, Young Master Cheng. Young Master Cheng fell in the latrine. Chapter 99. Outside the washroom, there was already a circle of maids. The leading maid said worriedly, Young Master Cheng, are you all right? Can you let us in? What answered her was the young man's exasperated voice, No. You're not allowed to enter. All of you, stand outside. The maidservants exchanged glances with one another. That was true. This young master from Shuo City usually looked so good. Now that he had fallen into the toilet, he would definitely be in a bad state and would not want others to see him in such a state. However, they couldn't just leave him like this. The maids were so anxious that they were about to go bald. He-Yen stood in the side room and sighed silently. To be honest, the Sun family's lavish decorations were very exquisite. In fact, the washroom was already very clean. However, she only did this to get rid of the incense ball that Ding Yi put on her waist. Young Master Cheng, who fell into the toilet, must have washed his entire body. Even if it was an incense ball, after such an incident, it could only be thrown away. Yuan Baozhen and his servant asked reasonably. They couldn't find any problem with it. If a person had to put a dirty incense ball on their body after a trip to the toilet, then they would be sick. However, He-Yen looked at the stains on her body through the cloth. The sacrifice she made was too big. Qing Lisu, this child, didn't seem to be very smart. She didn't think that she was the real smart one. These dirty and tiring jobs were now all done by He-Yen. What was this called? She thought in her heart. Suddenly, she heard someone shout from outside, "Young Master Cheng, come out. Military Governor Xiao is here. Xiao Ju is here." He-Yen originally thought that Fei Nu would come to pick him up. Why did Xiao Ju come back? He came back so early today. Before she could think clearly, she heard Xiao Ju's voice from outside, "Qing Lisu, come out." He-Yen, why was she always in such a sorry state every time she met Xiao Ju? He-Yen took a deep breath and walked out shakily with the help of the bamboo stick. Everyone outside held their breaths. The young man's clothes were stained, and his hair was a little messy. His eyes were covered with a black cloth, and his expression couldn't be seen, but his mouth was flat. As soon as she came out, she hurriedly complained in a direction, "Uncle, you're finally here. If I wasn't lucky, you would have a nephew who fell to his death in the toilet." Xiao Ju, He-Yen took a step forward and Xiao Ju dodged sideways. He-Yen loved cleanliness the most. It was probably the biggest concession that he could make by tolerating his disgust and coming here to pick up He-Yen. Fei Nu, bring him back and wash him clean. Xiao Ju couldn't stand the smell on He-Yen's body and turned to leave. He-Yen cursed in his heart. Look, is this something a human would do? Who did she fall into the toilet for? Xiao Ju was really an ingrate. Fei Nu came over to help He-Yen. This person also followed He-Yen closely. He-Yen fell into the toilet and even used a handkerchief to help him. He-Yen was speechless. He-Yen didn't need to remind him this time. Fei Nu ordered someone to bring hot water and a wooden basin for bathing. He said to He-Yen with a wooden face, "Go in and wash up." "You're not going to help me bathe?" she asked tentatively. "You have a fiancé. It's not convenient." Tisk, tsk, tsk. Time really reveals a person's heart. He-Yen couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. He trembled as he closed the door and jumped into the bathtub. Thinking about it, she really couldn't accept it. The dignified General Fei Hong had to jump into the toilet to avoid disaster. If this was seen by her subordinates and colleagues in the past, they would definitely laugh at her. However, Yuan Baozhen also didn't expect that the incense ball he gave her would be useless before he even saw Xiao Ju. After all, if the sky wanted to rain and people wanted to fall, no one could stop it. Outside the room, Fei Nu squatted down and used a branch to fiddle with the dirty clothes that He-Yen threw on the ground. A round incense ball rolled out from the clothes. Fei Nu used the branch to touch the incense ball and said, "This should be it." Xiao Ju glanced at the incense ball on the ground and didn't say anything. "Young master, did he do it on purpose or unintentionally?" Fei Nu was also a little confused. If He-Yen accidentally fell into the toilet and caused the incense ball to be useless, it was too much of a coincidence. But if he did it on purpose, if he and Yuan Baozhen were together, why would he do it? Even if it was a trick, it was too real. He did it on purpose. But, He curled his lips and smiled. It wasn't clear whether it was disdain or surprise in his eyes. It was very complicated, as he said, he can even think of such a method. He really doesn't care about trifles. This was also true. Who would have thought that He Yen would fall into the toilet pit? Perhaps even Yuan Baozhen himself wouldn't have thought of it. He Yan's actions were really unimaginable. Any decent person would not think of such a method. If he did it on purpose, Fei Nu looked at Xiao Ju and said in surprise, "Young master, are you saying that He Yen can see?" Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows and said, "Most likely." Then why did he pretend that he couldn't see? Fei Nu was a little puzzled. Was it to deceive us or to deceive Yuan Baozhen? Both. Xiao Ju said slowly, he might not be on the same side as anyone. Just like how Xiao Ju was on guard against He Yen while coldly watching Yuan Baozhen's act, He Yen was very likely to keep himself out of the matter. She was probably watching him and Yuan Baozhen fight as if she was watching a play. While deceiving Yuan Baozhen, she was also deceiving Xiao Ju. As for what her purpose was, it was still unclear. "Young master, will He Yen interfere with our work?" "No." Xiao Ju said, "It's almost over." Fei Nu was silent for a moment and said, "The reply from Shuojing will probably arrive tonight. After tonight, he would know what the background of this He Yen was and what he wanted." As for Yuan Baozhen, his good days were about to come to an end. In the room, Yuan Baozhen almost couldn't believe his ears. He asked the servant who came to report, "What did you say?" The servant of the Sun Manor was startled by his expression and said timidly, "Just now, young Master Ching fell into the toilet. Governor Xiao took him away." Ding Yi's expression changed dramatically. Yuan Baozhen held his forehead and waved his hand, "You can leave." The servant left. Yuan Baozhen slammed the table, "Bastard." He didn't need to think too much to know that the incense ball given to He Yen today was useless. Since he fell into the toilet, his whole body must be covered in filth. He had to be cleaned inside and out. How could the incense ball escape this disaster? Not good. Yuan Baozhen stood up and felt uneasy. Will Xiao Ju find out about the incense ball? Xiao Ju loves cleanliness. She won't touch it on purpose. But Ding Yi's expression was unpredictable. He Yen might not. You mean he did it on purpose? Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? We just gave him the incense ball, and he fell into the toilet. It was the same before. The so-called flying insect entering the cup at the banquet was only his side of the story. More importantly, why would Xiao Ju leave her nephew alone in the Sun residence? There's something wrong with this person. I have a feeling that Qingli isn't as simple as he seems. If there's something wrong with him, doesn't that mean he knows about our plans from the beginning? Could this be a trap set by Xiao Ju? Yuan Baozhen asked. He had a bone-deep fear of Xiao Ju. It was probably because he knew that this military governor of the Right Corps would kill without regard for status. I think we should do it tonight. Ding Yi finally spoke after a long time. What? Yuan Baozhen said anxiously, you can't beat a sober Xiao Ju. Because of this, they didn't dare to fight with Xiao Ju directly. Unfortunately, they failed at the banquet, so it would be difficult to find another opportunity. Originally, they wanted to start with Cheng Li Su, but this kid was even more strange. He was slippery and unpredictable. Even now, they still couldn't figure out what was going on. Yuan Baozhen's words seemed to have angered Ding Yi. A dark look flashed across his face as he said in a sinister voice, I never planned to start with him. His weird nephew is my true target. He Yen washed herself clean. In order to get rid of the smell, she took Cheng Li Su's perfume and rubbed it all over her body. Only after she changed into clean clothes did she dare to meet Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju sat in front of the table and stopped her from going forward. Stay 10 feet away from me. He Yen rolled her eyes in her heart, but she smiled and said, Uncle, I'm clean. If you don't believe me, you can smell me. She tried to go forward, but a sword sheath was hanging in front of her. It touched her nose and blocked her way. Through the gap in the black cloth, she could see Xiaoju covering her nose with her sleeve. She looked unhappy and her eyebrows were furrowed as if she had been attacked by a rebel army. He Yen spread her hands. Okay. I won't go forward. Second young Master Xiao was really fastidious. She didn't know if his fastidiousness could save his life. If she hadn't jumped into the toilet, she didn't know how long the second young Master Xiao would have lasted under the poison of the incense ball. He Yen felt regret. If she had known, she would have just thrown the incense ball in front of Xiaoju. Let's see if he would still be so picky. She held on to the bamboo stick and found a chair. She sat down and thought for a while before asking, "Uncle, how long are we going to stay in this house?" "Why?" Xiaoju said, "Do you want to go back?" "That's not it. I just feel that it's a bit weird." He Yen replied. She still wanted to find out more about He Rufei from Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi. Of course, she couldn't go back so soon. However, it wasn't right to stay here. He Yen didn't know what Xiaoju was doing, but Xiaoju's actions had already attracted Yuan Baozhen's attention. Now, Yuan Baozhen was looking for trouble with He Yen. If this continued, He Rufei wouldn't be able to uncover many of his secrets. Yuan Baozhen might even find out about her plan. "How is it weird?" Xiaoju said calmly, as if she didn't take her words to heart. "Every few days, Imperial Censor Yuan comes to talk to me. He Yen went straight to the point. I feel like he's trying to get information out of me." "Uncle, aren't you afraid that I'll reveal some secrets to him if I stay here alone?" Xiaoju looked at him with a half-smile. "What secrets do you have to reveal?" He Yen, Xiaoju and Fei Nu didn't tell He Yen what they were doing in secret. It was obvious that they didn't treat her as one of their own. Even if Yuan Baozhen wanted to get information, He Yen really didn't have any secrets to reveal to him. She was just an insignificant person who didn't know anything about this. She said, "That's not right either. How can an uncle leave his nephew alone in a wolf's den? Isn't that suspicious?" Who knew if Yuan Baozhen would make another sachet for her? She couldn't fall into the toilet again and again. It wouldn't hurt her eyes, it would hurt her brain. Suspicious? Xiaoju looked down and said slowly, "I don't think he's suspicious these past few days." He Yen screamed in his heart. That was because she had been lying for him. Anyone would be suspicious of such a clumsy lie. However, He Yen could tell that Xiaoju did it on purpose. She was probably trying to divert the trouble. This person was too black-hearted. She didn't even feel guilty for doing such a thing. She said, "Uncle, you've been running around all day. Have you found the culprit yet?" When she said this, there was a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Although her eyes were covered, she could imagine the young man rolling his eyes. Xiaoju replied calmly, "I found him." Found him. He Yen was stunned. "Who is it?" "You'll find out soon." What did she mean by "find out soon"? She already knew that the culprit was Yuan Baozhen and his servant. He Yen was so anxious that he scratched his head. He couldn't wait to bring Xiaoju to Yuan Baozhen. Ding Yi pointed at Yuan Baozhen and said to Xiaoju, "It's him. It's him. Catch him." However, she could only play dumb and asked, "Uncle, aren't you going to catch him now?" "It's not time yet." Xiaoju smiled. "Then how long do we have to wait?" "When the swindler shows up." He Yen, what? She didn't understand what Xiaoju meant. Before she could ask any more questions, Fei Nu had already walked over and pulled her out of the room. He pushed her out of the room and said, "It's late. You should rest first." With a bang, he closed the door again. He was really heartless. He Yen glared at the door behind him. There was a little person cursing in his heart with her hands on her hips. Not to mention that they were schoolmates in their previous lives. In this life, they had dealt with assassins together. They could be considered as half-life friends. What was with Xiaoju's attitude? With this attitude, there were still so many girls in Dawei who admired him. He was afraid that they were all poisoned by the sorcerer tribe of Nanjiang. She climbed onto the bed and lay flat. She pulled the blanket up and buried her head in it. Forget it. Rest is fine. Anyway, the person Yuan Baozhen wanted to kill is not me. After the autumn equinox, the night became even colder. He Yan was woken up by the cold. The Sun family's blanket was made of silk. It was cotton and soft. The embroidery on it was exquisite and round. It was very luxurious and grand. Although this kind of blanket was thin, it was very warm. He Yan had slept in the Sun family's house for the past few days. In terms of bedding, he was really impeccable. It was the first time that he was woken up by the cold like today. The black cloth was next to her. Before going to bed, she had taken it off. At this moment, He Yan slowly sat up. He wondered if it was too disturbing to ask someone to add a blanket for him in the middle of the night. When he turned his head, he saw that the window next to him was open. The wind was blowing in. No wonder it was so cold. The cold wind blew in. 3 layers of blankets were useless. He Yan wanted to get up and close the window. Suddenly, he thought of something. He turned his head. Sure enough, under the weak light of the lantern outside the window, Fei Nu's bed was empty. The person was not there. Fei Nu was not there. He did not need to go into the room to know that Xiao Ju was definitely not there. This master and servant pair were probably doing some shady business behind her back. He Yan was not surprised. He got off the bed and put on his shoes. He wanted to close the window and go back to sleep. The wind was extremely cold. The branches by the bed swayed and drops of dew fell. He Yan reached out to close the window. Suddenly, he saw a black shadow pass by not far away. If someone who did not know martial arts saw it, they would probably think that their eyes were playing tricks on them. It was late at night. Even the dog was asleep. How could there be someone wandering around? He Yan's mind flashed. He grabbed his clothes and followed out. That person's skills were not bad. Unfortunately, the person following was He Yan. He Yan followed very carefully. In her previous life, she had stayed in the vanguard. She had the experience of sneaking into the enemy camp at night. Therefore, doing this kind of thing could be considered easy. This person in black was not Xiao Ju or Fei Nu. Xiao Ju and Fei Nu were very tall, but this person was not. His entire body was covered in night clothes. No clues could be seen. He seemed to be very familiar with the Sun family's courtyard. He avoided places where there might be guards and walked to an abandoned courtyard in the Sun family's residence. In the big Sun family's residence, there was such an abandoned courtyard. It was very far from the main hall. He Yan's eyes were blind for a few days. He hid under the window and eavesdropped on the conversations of the servant girls outside. He knew that this courtyard used to be the residence of one of Sun Ling's beloved concubines. This beloved concubine was the youngest daughter of a rice shop owner in Liangzhou. She was beautiful and cute. Unfortunately, Sun Ling took a fancy to her and brought her home. The rice shop owner was originally engaged to a scholar outside the city who lived with his widow. The scholar was dissatisfied with the humiliation of having his wife stolen. He wanted to sue the higher-ups. However, the officials protected each other. Liangzhou city was under the control of the Sun father and son. In the end, the scholar and his widow were both sent to prison and died of illness not long after. When the rice shop owner heard this bad news, she cried every day. Sun Ling was a person who liked the new and hated the old. In just a few days, he hated this girl. Seeing her cry every day was an eyesore. He also felt that she had touched his bad luck. He raised his hand and gave the girl to his subordinates. A good girl was tortured to death just like that. It was probably because her death was too tragic. Not long after, there were rumors in the courtyard that someone heard the girl crying at night. Sun Ling felt that it was bad luck and sealed the courtyard. With the rumors of ghosts, no one dared to enter. This courtyard became a deserted courtyard. You purposely walked slowly so that I could catch up to you. Didn't you want me to follow you? I've always been a very kind person. He Yan also smiled. I hate to let other people's efforts go to waste. She had found out from the beginning. However, since the other party had already set a trap, her disguise had been exposed. There was no need to continue pretending. Moreover, a real master was never afraid of traps. Only those who were not strong enough would hesitate. Ding Yi's expression changed slightly. After a moment, he smiled. Did you learn your stubbornness from Xiaoju? I was born with it. You're not Qing Li Su. Ding Yi stared into He Yan's eyes. Who are you? He suspected He Yan even earlier than Yuan Baozhen. It was only because that day at the banquet, before Xiaoju drank, that young man glanced at him. That gaze was a mixture of surprise, anger, hatred, unwillingness, and doubt. It was filled with a myriad of emotions as it pressed towards him. Although He Yan quickly moved his gaze away, Ding Yi still noticed it at that moment. He had never seen this young man before, but he knew very well that this young man had seen him before. Who are you? He asked again. He Yan smiled. Gods and Buddhas were watching silently. The talismans outside the house were calming and exorcising demons. There seemed to be distant Sanskrit chanting Niao Niao. The young man slowly raised his head. His expression was familiar. His gaze was like lightning, piercing people's hearts. I'm a ghost that you killed, he said softly. I crawled out of the netherworld and came to take your life. Chapter 100. This was an unfamiliar face that Ding Yi had never seen before, and there were no signs of disguise. Before coming to the Sun Mansion, Yuan Baozhen had said that the person who came with Xiaoju was his nephew, the young master of the right minister's house, the famous, useless young master, in the Shuo capital. He had only mentioned it casually and did not go into detail. After all, at that time, none of them had expected that this seemingly harmless useless young master would mess up the entire game. He could not be the real Qing Li Su, the young master raised in the Shuo capital would not have such a fierce gaze. Who was he? Was he Xiaoju's subordinate? But why did Xiaoju's subordinate look at him with such a gaze? It was as if they had a feud. Looking at the young man in front of him, Ding Yi said, Are you trying to act mysterious here? He Yan chuckled, Are you scared? Ding Yi's smile faded, You're so stubborn that it's hard to like you. As he finished speaking, the dagger in his sleeve suddenly grew a few inches, and quickly stabbed towards He Yan. He Yan spun around and flew up. The two figures wrestled together, and the silhouettes reflected on the window were particularly eerie. If the servants of the Sun Mansion were to pass by at this moment, they would probably confirm the rumors of ghosts. He Yan was slightly surprised. At that time, she had fallen into Hirufei's trap, and it was this person in front of her who had given her the medicine that caused her to go blind. She had always thought that Ding Yi was just a servant who worked for Hirufei. Later, when she met Yuan Baozhen, she knew that this person's skills were not bad, but only when she personally fought with him did she realize that Ding Yi was more powerful than she had thought. His skills were far superior to the head assassin, Ying Yu. Not only did he have such skills, but he was also very cautious, and would not make a move unless he was completely confident. Therefore, even if it was an assassination at the banquet, he would be the last chess piece, and would not make a move unless it was absolutely necessary. The incense ball was the same. It had to wait for Xiaoju to be poisoned and weak before it could be used to kill her in one shot. Today, Ding Yi had set a trap for He Yan to fall into it. However, he was just thinking that no matter how outstanding He Yan was, he was just a 16-year-old boy. He couldn't be that powerful. This person was both conceited and cautious. He was conceited because he was confident in his skills and abilities. He was cautious because he wanted to be absolutely safe. He was not to be underestimated. Ding Yi was also shocked. He had never seen such an opponent before. It was said that Xiao Ju, the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, was skilled in both the pen and the sword, and rarely had a match. He really wanted to fight with her, but He Rufei had repeatedly warned him not to fight with Xiao Ju, so he could only make his moves secretly and wait for an opportunity to strike. A person like him would never be able to compete with others openly. He was like a rat hiding in a ditch, only able to hide in the dark. Having a body full of martial arts skills but nowhere to display them was like walking in the night in brocade clothes. In Ding Yi's heart, it was not that he did not feel disappointed. This boy had a mysterious background, and he was eager to try. He wanted to defeat him openly, and then use him to scheme against Xiao Ju. This way, he could show off his abilities. However, after this fight, he realized that he had been too careless. This boy's skills were not weak. The dagger brushed past He Yan's head. Ding Yi's palm came and hit He Yan's left shoulder, causing her to retreat a few steps and knock over the Buddha statue on the table. "You are being disrespectful to the Buddha statue," He Yan said. "Aren't you afraid that the Buddha statue will come to you at night?" Ding Yi looked at her unhappily. This boy had been hit by his palm, yet he could still talk. He sneered, "Do you know that a Buddha statue here represents a dead person? You will soon join them." He Yan reached out and touched her shoulder, revealing a frightened expression. "Don't tell ghost stories at night for no reason." Although she said this, she did not hesitate to stab Ding Yi with the dagger in her hand. Ding Yi dodged, and the dagger flicked his hat off, causing it to fall to the ground. He Yan sighed in her heart. She did not have any weapons when she came out. This dagger was the one she used to cut the deer meat on the first day she came to the Sun family's banquet. At that time, Xiao Ju was stabbed, and she rushed in to help in a hurry. This dagger used to cut the deer meat, at this moment, seemed too elegant and impractical. Just as she was thinking, Ding Yi came forward again. He Yan dodged the tip of the dagger, and was hit on the back by his palm. He suddenly felt a sweet taste in his throat. Although Ding Yi used a dagger, he preferred to fight barehanded. He was very confident in his own skills, which was why he did this. "After being hit by 2 of my palms, you are still standing." Ding Yi's eyes moved slightly. "You are the first." He Yan swallowed the blood in his throat and smiled. "You are also the first to be able to survive 2 of my palms." "You have a sharp tongue," Ding Yi said, and ran forward again. He Yan turned around and fled to the window. Lady He's body was still too weak. Perhaps God was like this, and there was no absolute fairness in the world. A woman's mind was more delicate than a man's, and her body was destined to be weaker than a man's. Although she was brave and good at fighting in her previous life, she was now only a 16-year-old girl. Before this spring, she had never learned any martial arts. Her inner strength was not as strong as Ding Yi's. "You want to escape?" Ding Yi laughed, and reached out to grab He Yan's collar and pulled back. He Yan's body was pulled back by him, and he fell into the shrine. Incense ashes scattered in the air. "No one will come here at night." Ding Yi laughed. "If no one dares to come, you can only wait for death here." He Yan stood up, and kicked away a Buddha statue in front of him, and laughed. "I am a dead man." Her casual movements made Ding Yi feel extremely familiar, and he was stunned for a moment. Ding Yi was He Rufei's subordinate, and had been with He Rufei for many years. They had always lived in a courtyard, far away from Shuajing. In the past few years, He Rufei had trained Ding Yi to be a man of sacrifice. Ding Yi was very skilled, knew how to make poison, knew how to disguise, and was very meticulous. Even if he was someone else's subordinate, he was still very outstanding. His skills naturally needed to be put to good use. However, when they returned to Shuajing, Ding Yi's first task was to make a bowl of poison that could blind people and deliver it to young Mistress Su, He Rufei's cousin. At that time, he was very dissatisfied with this task, and did not know why He Rufei gave the order to kill his cousin. The fight between women was a matter of the harem. What use was there for him? It was a waste of talent. Ding Yi felt insulted. He Rufei told him, "Don't underestimate her. You have to be careful, and don't let anyone find out." Ding Yi was very confused. How powerful could a woman be? Why did he have to be careful? Half curious and half disdainful, Ding Yi entered the Su family and stayed there for 3 days. It was during these 3 days that he realized that young Mistress Su was not a simple woman. She was very sensitive. Sometimes, when Ding Yi hid in the dark and wanted to observe her, she immediately noticed that something was wrong. There were a few times when Ding Yi almost exposed himself. In the end, he had no choice but to use the identity of He Rufei's servant to hide in the Su family. Although young Mistress Su was cautious and sensitive, she trusted the He family very much and gave him an opportunity. He still remembered that the bowl of medicine was given to young Mistress Su. When young Mistress Su heard that it was a tonic sent by the He family, she drank it all without thinking. At that time, he did not know what to feel. This kind of woman with such skills and ability, if he fought her openly, he would have to put in a lot of effort to take her life. However, as long as someone close to her took action, she could get what she wanted with just a bowl of medicine. She did not even need to put in much effort. No wonder people always said that the only people who could be deceived and hurt were the people close to them. During those 3 days, Ding Yi also noticed some of young Mistress Su's little habits. For example, sometimes when there was something in front of her, like a fallen tree branch, she liked to kick it away. Her kicking seemed casual, but she used a lot of force. This was considered very rude for a woman from a rich family. Young Mistress Su also knew this, so every time she unconsciously kicked something away, she would react. If there was no one around, she would leave as if nothing had happened. If there was someone around, she would stick out her tongue apologetically. While she was doing this, her face, which was always expressionless, took on a lively expression. It was as if this was the real her. Therefore, after such a long time, Ding Yi almost could not remember young Mistress Su's appearance, but he still remembered her kicking away the tree branch in front of her. Just now, the young man in front of him kicked away the Buddha statue at his feet. That action and expression suddenly overlapped with the young Mistress Su in Ding Yi's memory. But how could he be young Mistress Su? After drinking that bowl of medicine, young Mistress Su became blind. Ding Yi thought that was the end of it. Until this spring, when he was at the He family, he heard that young Mistress Su slipped and fell into the pond and drowned. Ding Yi did not think that she really slipped and drowned, because when He Rufei and the He family heard this, other than the madam of the second branch, they were not surprised at all. They must have known this long ago. What could cause the entire He family to be so ruthless towards a married daughter, and not be at ease even if she became blind, and still want her life? After thinking about it, he gradually thought of a clue. He Rufei lived in another courtyard for many years, and when he returned to Shuajing, he suddenly became General Feihong. Ding Yi thought that the He family found a substitute for He Rufei, and since He Rufei was back, the substitute should die. But, what if that substitute was a woman? This sounded inconceivable, but it was not impossible. Especially when Ding Yi thought about young Mistress Su's alertness and skills, it was not something that an ordinary woman could do. Especially when they heard that young Mistress Su was blind, she did not collapse, but tried to listen to sounds to distinguish shapes. Perhaps it was because of this that the He family felt uneasy. What they needed was an obedient blind person. If this blind person could walk, move, and talk, they would not be at ease. The young Mistress Su that he had blinded might be the famous General Feihong. Every time he thought of this, Ding Yi felt proud and regretful. He was proud that he had quelled the chaos in Xichang, and that the General Feihong, who many people were afraid of, had been defeated by a small character like him. Regretfully, although he had schemed against young Mistress Sue, it was not honorable. It was just a bowl of medicine. The light was dim, and the young man's appearance was blurred. Yan's eyes curved. It's not a good habit to be absent-minded during a fight. Her voice was accompanied by her movements. She was as nimble as a ghost, and in the blink of an eye, she was in front of Ding Yi. Pfft! The dagger scratched his sleeve, leaving a bloody mark. Yan had stabbed his arm. Is this all you've got? Ding Yi's eyes flashed with excitement, and a little disdain. This young man was definitely not General Feihong. General Feihong was more than this. He disapprovingly tore off the part of his sleeve that had fallen out. He looked at Yan and laughed. I don't care if you're a human or a ghost, you're going to die today. He rushed towards Yan. The room was very spacious, but because there were Buddha statues everywhere, it seemed narrow and cramped. Ding Yi had been practicing martial arts since he was young. He had a strong inner strength, and his methods were treacherous and dangerous. If not, he would not be He Rufei's trusted aide. Yan had fought with him for 4 or 5 moves. The places where she was hit were covered with wounds. The most serious injury was on her back, which was cut by Ding Yi's dagger. The window was right in front of her, but she could not escape. She was caught and thrown to the ground. Ding Yi grabbed her head and looked at her in confusion. Who are you? Who do you think I am? The young man's lips were bleeding, but his expression was indifferent, as if he did not feel pain. Even his smile did not change. In a trance, Ding Yi thought of young Mistress Sue. This thought made him unhappy. He tightened his grip on Yan's neck and said, if you don't tell me who you are, I'll kill you and bury you here. There are Buddha statues and spells everywhere. You'll never be reincarnated. So, he said softly, as if he was coaxing her. Who are you? The young man's skills were already very good, but he gave Ding Yi a feeling of déjà vu. Ding Yi did not want to miss out on the truth. But Yan heard him and laughed. She laughed so hard that she coughed up some blood. She laughed and said, I've already told you that since I'm an evil spirit that crawled out of hell, I don't care about reincarnation. Moreover, even I can come and go freely. These spells and Buddha statues are just clay and paper. You can't treat them as real. You're so gullible. Does your master, He Rufei, know that? He actually knew about He Rufei. Ding Yi was stunned. His expression suddenly changed. What else do you know? He subconsciously reached behind him, but found nothing. The young man's face was still in front of him, smiling. Ding Yi felt that something was wrong. He stabbed the dagger in his hand, but the young man seemed to have suddenly woken up. He gently pulled back and escaped from Ding Yi's control. She held a small plum blossom dart in her hand. She leaned against the shrine and played with it. She said, Is this your trump card? You even hid it in your clothes. If you hadn't been beaten up so many times, I wouldn't have found it. Ding Yi's face suddenly darkened. Are you playing with me? I wouldn't dare, the young man smiled. It's just that I can't fall for the same trick twice. I came prepared. It's not your fault. You hid it very well. In her previous life, this person had brought her a bowl of medicine. Yan had become blind. Seeing him again in this life, she felt that there was something wrong with the wine at the banquet. In Yuan Baozhen's room, Ding Yi had even given her a fragrant ball. If he wasn't a frequent user of poison, he wouldn't have carried so many poisons with him. Because of this first impression, she paid special attention to this person. Ding Yi's fingertips were black, as if they had been soaked in medicine for many years. His skin was chapped. This was a pair of hands that used poison. Together with the hearts of the assassins, this person must have been a sinister person. He must have hidden poisoned weapons on him. The dagger was just a distraction. The real trump card was the poisoned plum blossom dart. It wasn't difficult to fight him in close combat. The difficult part was that if this person was forced to use his trump card, he would be seriously injured or even killed. He Yan didn't dare to gamble with his life. She observed Ding Yi and found him to be very conceited. Although he had a dagger, he was used to fighting with her bare-handed. He was confident that his skills were not inferior to hers. Therefore, He Yan deliberately exposed his weakness and pretended to be weak. He was just an ordinary young man who was slightly skilled but slightly inferior. Sure enough, Ding Yi began to underestimate his opponent in a moment. She successfully stole Ding Yi's trump card. Ding Yi said fiercely, "I must kill you. Do you think you still have the chance?" He Yan snapped his fingers. "Now it's your turn to be beaten." The two figures rushed together. The young man who seemed to have weaker internal strength was indeed a disguise. Her movements were faster and fiercer. In a moment, she kicked away the dagger in Ding Yi's hand. She lowered her body to avoid his big palm. Without turning her head, she stabbed Ding Yi's waist with the dagger. "You!" He widened his eyes in disbelief. He Yan kicked his knee, causing Ding Yi to kneel in front of him. He Yan grabbed his hair and said, "Now it's my turn to ask questions. Why did He Rufei want to kill Xiao Ju? Are you working for Prime Minister Su? What benefits did he promise you? What did He Rufei want to do?" She spoke quickly and anxiously. Ding Yi was stunned for a moment. Then, he slowly smiled. "I won't tell you," he said. "If I tell you, you will kill me immediately. Why don't you try and see if there's any way to make me talk?" His smile was even a little shameless. He Yan had seen this expression on his face many times. He was not unfamiliar with it. When she was in the Fuyue army, when she captured the enemy's troops, some of the captives would quickly surrender and betray them. Others were men of sacrifice. They would rather die than talk. No matter how they were forced to confess, they would not talk. In the end, it would make the interrogators feel defeated. Ding Yi's expression was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Right now, his words sounded nice, but he didn't leave any room for negotiation. It seemed like he was leaving a way out, but in reality, he was just toying with He Yan. If he was an ordinary person, he would be fooled. Maybe he would let him live. In the future, when Ding Yi's accomplices had the opportunity, they would rescue him. But He Yan was not an ordinary person. She would not be fooled. She looked at Ding Yi and suddenly said, "You kept asking me who I was. Did you think of someone?" Ding Yi's expression suddenly changed. He stared at her face and did not say anything. "Don't you think it's strange? You and I have only met a few times. How could I know that you have hidden poisonous weapons on you? I was the one who reminded you about the wine at the banquet. How could I know?" Ding Yi sneered. "Don't pretend to be mysterious. Kill me if you can. If I don't hate you, I won't kill you. But what's the use of keeping you alive? I live for revenge. Gods and Buddhas can testify that I'm not lying." He Yan laughed in a low voice, as if to cater to this strange atmosphere. In the autumn night, there was a sudden clap of thunder. Lightning lit up the room. The benevolent Buddha statues looked at them as if they were fulfilling a karma from many years ago. "You once fed a bowl of medicine to a woman. That woman became blind." The young man said softly. "Guess if I'm that woman." She laughed. Ding Yi struggled. "You are." Before he could finish his sentence, his eyes suddenly widened. A trace of blood flowed from his lips and the light in his eyes quickly faded. The plum blossom dart pierced his throat very deeply. In just a moment, he was dead. He Yan stood up and looked at the person at her feet. Ding Yi's body lay among the glittering Buddha statues. It was as if she was mocking him. She said in a low voice, "You can die here and see if you can be reincarnated." She turned and walked out. He Yan could not keep Ding Yi alive. She did not even know where to hide such a person. If Xiaoju found out and asked her why she was investigating the He family, He Yan would not be able to explain. Since he was a man of sacrifice, there was no point in keeping him alive if he did not want to reveal his secrets. Moreover, this person had done many evil things. His death was not to be regretted. Dying here was the best ending for him. After all, this courtyard was haunted. It would take a few days for someone to find his body. Thunder rumbled outside and the autumn rain began to fall. He Yan stumbled towards the direction of the house. Although she used herself as bait to lure Ding Yi to let his guard down, she did suffer a lot of injuries. Her body was not as strong as it was in her previous life. Ding Yi was also not an ordinary person. She might have underestimated He Rufei's strength. The wound on her back was drenched by the rain. The blood flowed into the courtyard and was quickly washed away. He Yan felt that all the strength in her body was disappearing. This was probably the most embarrassing situation she had ever been in since she was reborn. Fortunately, when she went out, Xiaoju and Fei Nu were not around. It had only been a short while, so they probably had not returned yet. She had to quickly go back and change her clothes, pretending that nothing had happened. The house was right in front of her. He Yan jumped in through the window. Seeing that there was no one in the house, she was relieved. She muttered in a low voice, "Fortunately, I was not discovered." Just as she finished speaking, she heard someone's voice. "It's too early for you to be happy." With a "pa" sound, the room suddenly lit up. He Yan's entire body froze. A person was sitting in front of a small table in the middle. He was playing with a fire starter in his hand. The light on the table flickered. That person had handsome eyebrows and neat clothes. He turned his head and glanced at her. "You're back." It was Xiaoju. He Yan's heart trembled. She quickly regained her senses and said, "Uncle. This is a misunderstanding. I just realized that I can see. I met an assassin outside." Before she finished speaking, the young man sitting in front of the small table was already in front of her. He pulled out a sword and stabbed it towards her chest. He Yan hurriedly reached out to block it. The tip of the sword did not want to kill her. It turned a corner and sliced open her clothes. Swish, the blood-stained clothes were torn to shreds. The girl's body was pale and weak. Her chest was wrapped in layers of white cloth, like a bud. He Yan's face suddenly turned red. Xiaoju hugged her from behind. The scabbard was pressed against He Yan's neck. Their breathing was tense. "The liar is here." He curled the corners of his lips, as if he was the lazy and dissolute young man in white robes under a big tree. His voice contained a hint of mockery as he indifferently laughed, "Should I call you He Yan, or eldest Miss He?" The end of the second volume. Chapter 101. The atmosphere in the room froze in an instant. It should have been a scene that made people blush and their hearts race, but when it was said by the person in front of them, there was no longer a trace of ambiguity, only the embarrassment and danger of being seen through. He Yan quickly regained his senses and looked at him. The fear and nervousness that belonged to the young Cheng Li Su faded away, and he revealed his usual smile. "You can call me whatever you want, as long as the governor is happy." The daughter of He Sui, the gate commandant, actually came to join the army. He stared into He Yan's eyes with a smile that was not a smile. "Lady, he is very brave." This person. He Yan's mind moved. Since he even knew He Sui's name, it was obvious that he was secretly investigating him, and it was not because he was exposed at the Sun Manor. From Shuo capital to here, even if a messenger pigeon was sent at top speed, it would still take more than a month. Xiaoju had long suspected him. Why was this? The young man smiled. "I did not expect the governor to pay so much attention to me. I am ashamed." He Yan's face did not show any panic. Even if he was surprised, it was just a flash. Even now, if it was a normal woman, her clothes were pulled open and her identity exposed, she would probably be ashamed and angry. This person, on the other hand, looked like he did not care at all, and his heart was bigger than a man's. Perhaps it was because of this that from Jingcheng to Liangzhou, and even after staying in the Liangzhou guards for so long, no one discovered that he was a woman. When Xiao Ju received the secret letter from Shuo capital, she could not believe it. The gate commandant did have a child called He Yan, but it was a daughter, not a son. He also had a younger son called He Yunsheng. Half a year ago, He Yan's daughter was killed by thieves on a boat on the Chunlai River. She sank into the river, and her body was still not found. According to the time, it was the day that He Yan joined the army. But for a woman to come out and join the army without being discovered for 1 or 2 days, and be safe and sound for more than half a year, it was either that the people around her were blind, or that this person was too good at disguising. Xiao Ju was not blind. Thinking carefully about the moment when she interacted with He Yan, she felt that this person was very good at disguising himself. She was born delicate and weak, and her figure was small and thin, but people would not associate her with a woman. This was because no ordinary woman would be so casual about trifles. Moreover, she was one of the best in the Liang Province Guards. Why did you come to the Liang Province Guard? He Yan thought quickly and replied, I committed a crime in Shuajing. If I was caught, I would be dead. I had no choice but to join the army. What is it? Even now, this person still did not believe her. She had clearly investigated everything. He Yan sighed, there was a young master from a wealthy family who coveted my beauty. He kidnapped me and wanted to take me as his wife. Unfortunately, an assassin came and took his life. If I stayed on the ship alone, I wouldn't be able to explain myself. Perhaps others would think that I was in cahoots with the assassins. I had no choice but to join the army. He Yan's words were half true and half false. He sounded very sincere. Xiao Ju looked at her playfully. Coveting your beauty. He Yan, what did this mean? Was he looking down on her? He Yan had looked at himself in the mirror before. Miss He's face could definitely be called dainty and charming. After all, not everyone's standards are as high as the governor's, she said with a fake smile. Xiao Ju nodded. So that's how it is. He Yan's words were half true and half false. She knew that Xiao Ju was not easy to fool, but she did not expect him to believe her so easily. She did not expect him to stop talking about it. Why did you come out in the middle of the night? His gaze swept over He Yan, and the smell of blood was hard to hide. It dyed the mattress on the bed a light red. This person actually knew that she was injured. Even so, he didn't have any pity for her. He questioned her, and now, he didn't even move his hand away from her neck. In Xiao Ju's eyes, there was probably no difference between men and women. I killed Yuan Baozhen's guards, she said. After a while, Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows. Why? In the past few days when the governor was not in the Fu, Yuan Baozhen kept coming to see me. I always felt that he was suspicious of me. Later, I overheard their conversation. He Yan paused before continuing. They seemed to be following the orders of a person called Su Xiang to take your life. They were also the ones who prepared the banquet. You mean Su Xiang? Xiao Ju looked up at her. Her limpid eyes showed a strange emotion. He Yan shrugged. Yes, you can think about whether you have offended someone called Su Xiang. I woke up because of the cold. When I woke up, you were not there. The window was open. When I closed the window, I saw someone pass by. That person deliberately led me to the abandoned courtyard of the Sun Fu. He was Yuan Baozhen's guard. He wanted to use me as a hostage to tie you down. He Yan shook her head. But I am not the real Qing Li Su. I don't think the governor would give up for me. What if the governor killed me with an arrow to prevent future trouble? After thinking about it, I could not fall into his hands. I fought with him for a long time and finally killed him. He Yen gestured for her to look at herself. That's how I ended up like this. Although she said it casually, she was still injured. Her complexion was not good and her body was losing strength. To be able to kill Yuan Baozhen's guard and still be alive, you are very capable. I think so too, He Yen forced a smile. Then, Governor, do I have the qualifications to enter the Nine Flags Battalion now? She did not hide her desire to enter the Nine Flags Battalion. You think you can enter the Nine Flags Battalion? Xiao Zhu asked. Of course, and I helped you get rid of a big problem. Governor, you should reward me. Xiao Zhu was not angry. Instead, she laughed and let go of He Yan's hand. She looked down at her and said mockingly, sending you back to Shuajing tomorrow will be my reward for you. No. He Yan sat up straight, and with this movement, it pulled on his wound, causing him to hiss in pain. She said, I can't go back to Shuajing. If I go back to Shuajing, the Fan family will not let me go. Governor, do you have the heart to let a good person be wrongly imprisoned? Have the heart. He Yan. You can't do this. You don't have the qualifications to negotiate with me. He Yan said so much that she felt dizzy. She was afraid that if she continued, she would not be able to hold on. She did not even treat the wound on her body. She said, you will regret it. Why would I regret it? Since I am going to be sent back to Shuajing, there is no need to hide my identity. Everyone knows that there is a woman in the Yangzhou guards and will guess what is going on. He Yan smiled slightly. I can only tell them that my relationship with you is not normal. Xiao Zhu heard this and said carelessly, how is it not normal? Not normal means not normal. I know that there is a red mole on your waist. As soon as she said this, the room suddenly became silent. There was only the sound of thunder outside the window and the continuous autumn rain falling on the stone floor. Xiao Zhu slowly turned to look at her. The anger in her eyes grew stronger. The young man looked like a rascal. He smiled and said with a pale face, previously when you were bathing. My eyesight is not bad. I saw it with one glance. If you want to blame someone, blame it on our governor for being so charming. Even the red mole on your waist is so perfect that it is hard to forget. There was such a woman in this world? Xiao Zhu could not believe it. After He Yan said this, she seemed to be unable to hold on. Her head tilted and she fainted. Xiao Zhu, Fei Nu's voice came from outside the door. Young master. Xiao Zhu said, come in. She grabbed the mattress on the bed and threw it on He Yan to cover her. Fei Nu came in and did not look at He Yan. She said, the body of Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard was found in the side courtyard of the Sun residence. He died from his own plum flower darts. Xiao Zhu said, I know. So, He Yan did not lie about this matter. The smell of blood in the room was so strong that it could not be ignored. Fei Nu hesitated for a moment before asking, young master, He Yan is injured? Fei Nu was also very surprised when she found out that He Yan was a woman. Other than her figure and appearance, He Yan did not look like a woman at all from head to toe. However, it was this woman who killed Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard. That bodyguard was very skilled in martial arts and was best at using poison. Her injury is not light. Young master, what do you plan to do with her now? Fei Nu asked. Xiao Zhu paused for a moment and said, go out and find a female doctor. Fei Nu was slightly surprised. Xiao Zhu's words meant that she wanted to save He Yan. Young master, have you confirmed that she is not one of Prime Minister Su's people? It doesn't seem like it. Xiao Zhu said, Su Jingfu despises women. He will not let women participate in important matters. In the secret letter from Shua capital, it said that the He family and Su Jingfu have no contact. However, he thought for a moment, it is better to be careful. Fei Nu nodded, I will go and find a female doctor. After Fei Nu left, Xiaoju turned sideways and looked at He Yan, who was lying on the bed. She did not seem to be one of Su Jingfu's people, but it did not mean that she was not suspicious. A 16-year-old girl who was born in the family of a military officer at the city gate. Even if she had practiced martial arts since she was young, she should not be so outstanding and invincible in the Yangzhou guards. How could an ordinary person have such willpower to mingle in the military camp? It should be known that there were men who could not bear hardships, but she did not complain. If she joined the army only because of the matter with Fan Cheng, it was a bit far-fetched. Moreover, she had always wanted to join the Nine Flags Battalion. The rain continued to fall, and the girl's face was pale. When she returned, she saw that she was covered in wounds, especially the knife wound on her back. It was very deep and long, but she did not cry out in pain. Even when she fainted due to exhaustion, the corners of her mouth were still curled up. She looked like a rascal. There was such a girl in the world. She was powerful and hateful. She was cunning and shameless. Xiaoju closed the window and left. When He Yan woke up, the sky was already bright. She was sleeping on the bed she usually slept on, but her clothes had been changed. He Yan sat up and unconsciously opened her inner clothes. She saw that there was a white bandage wrapped around her waist. The wound from her fight with Ding Yi last night had already been bandaged. Thinking back carefully, he recalled what had happened last night. She remembered that she and Xiaoju were at loggerheads. She used the red mole on Xiaoju's waist to threaten the other party. Xiaoju was very angry, and then she did not know what happened. She must have fainted. But now, she touched her head. Her hair was still in the bun, and her clothes were men's clothes. No one else knew that she was a girl. Was Xiaoju keeping it a secret for her? He Yan sighed in relief. She looked to her side and did not see Fei Nu or Xiaoju. Did the two of them know that she was a girl, so they simply left her in the Sun residence? He Yan wanted to get out of bed, but when she moved, a small bottle with a long neck rolled out from her chest. She opened the bottle, and there were some black pills inside. There was also a note beside the bed. It said, "Wake up and take medicine." The handwriting was sharp and strong, and it was very beautiful. He Yan recognized that it was Xiaoju's handwriting at a glance. When she was in the Xianchang school, Xiaoju was outstanding in everything. Even the essays she wrote were hung at the entrance of the school for people to see. He Yan had a deep impression of this handwriting. She secretly copied a few copies and wanted to imitate it, but because she could not write the feeling of Xiaoju, she gave up. Second young master Xiao left a note for her to take medicine. It should be relatively peaceful, and nothing should happen for the time being. He Yan thought to herself. Suddenly, she remembered something and looked at herself. If she wanted to protect her identity as a girl from being exposed, she could not use the servants of the Sun residence. Then who changed her clothes? Who helped her bandage her wounds? Xiaoju could not be, so it must be Fei Nu. Although she had been in the army for many years and did not care as much about her skin as other girls, she still felt uncomfortable thinking about it. It was as if she had been taken advantage of. But it was useless to think about it now. The other party had good intentions. She got out of bed, put on her shoes, and opened the door to take a look. As soon as she went out, He Yan felt that something was wrong. Because of the assassin at the Sun family's banquet, the servants of the Sun residence were not allowed to go near the room that He Yan and the others lived in. However, there were still maids sweeping from a distance, but today there was not a single one. Looking from a distance, it looked like the entire Sun residence was empty. Even if Xiaoju wanted to abandon her and not care about her, why was the entire Sun residence empty? Could it be that something had happened? He Yan was confused. After thinking about it, she decided to go outside. She walked past her room, turned around the garden, and arrived at the main courtyard. She saw many soldiers wearing red armor surrounding the main hall. The maids and servants were squatting in several rows. Sun Xiangfu and his son were surrounded in the middle. Yuan Baozhen stood to the side, facing off against Xiaoju. She had just woken up from a nap. Why were they fighting? He Yan was deep in thought when she met Xiaoju's gaze. His eyes were cold, inexplicably reminding He Yan of what happened last night. He was inexplicably embarrassed, but after thinking about it, he braced himself and used Cheng Li Su's unique happy tone to call out, "Uncle." The tense atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by him calling out, "Uncle." Everyone turned to look at her. Yuan Baozhen's eyes flashed, "Young Master Cheng, you can see." He Yan remembered that she had not tied the cloth around her neck. However, that was not important now. Ding Yi was dead, and her identity as a woman had been exposed by Xiaoju. It seemed that Xiaoju had finally found the person who tried to assassinate her. Now was the time to settle the score. She was just a small person. Whether she was blind or a normal person, she could not change the overall situation. He Yan scratched her head and replied, "Is that so?" "It seems so. I can indeed see. I am indeed blessed by the heavens." This lie was too perfunctory, but naturally, no one dared to question her. Yuan Baozhen seemed to have realized something and asked, "Has young Master Cheng seen my bodyguard?" "No." He Yan said, "Could it be that Imperial Censor Yuan's bodyguard has disappeared?" She smiled, making it difficult for others to read her thoughts. Yuan Baozhen felt very uneasy. After Ding Yi went out last night, he did not return until this morning. Something must have happened. Previously, he had an argument with Ding Yi. Ding Yi wanted to kidnap Cheng Li Su and use her to threaten Xiaoju. Yuan Baozhen felt that this was not a good time. They parted on bad terms. However, the person who Ding Yi really listened to was Hirufei. There was nothing he could do. If he had snuck out last night, it must have been for Cheng Li Su. Now, Cheng Li Su was standing here perfectly fine. Even her eyes looked normal. However, Ding Yi had disappeared. Yuan Baozhen's heart sank. He felt that something bad must have happened. Xiaoju had ordered people to surround the Sun estate early in the morning. This made him even more uneasy. This person's way of doing things was very logical. When he didn't hear Yuan Baozhen's reply, He Yan wasn't in a hurry. He moved to Xiaoju's side and stood properly. He first smiled at Xiaoju in an ingratiating manner before asking Slave Fei beside him in a low voice, "Big brother Slave Fei, what's going on now?" Fei Nu looked at He Yan's normal smiling face and felt that He Yan's calmness was even better. After such a big incident last night, her identity had clearly been exposed. However, she could still continue to act as if nothing had happened. It was admirable. Before Fei Nu could reply, Sun Xiangfu had already opened his mouth. His expression was very ugly, but he still forced a smile. "Governor, what do you mean by this?" "But what did our Sun residents not do well enough to annoy the governor?" Sun Ling stood beside Sun Xiangfu and stared at Xiaoju with hatred. He did not speak, but it seemed that he could not calm down. "That's right," Yuan Baozhen stroked his beard and muttered, "Governor, where did you get these soldiers from?" "His Majesty currently forbids private soldiers and horses. If you are really dissatisfied with Magistrate Sun, you cannot vent your anger in this way." He Yan raised his eyebrows. These words were harsh, accusing Xiaoju of two crimes in one breath. One was privately raising soldiers and the other was using public office to avenge private wrongs. What a sharp tongue. Hearing this, Xiaoju curved her lips and said, "Imperial Censor Yuan is overthinking. These are soldiers that I borrowed from Xialing County. The crime of privately raising soldiers and horses is not something that I can bear. I wonder if Imperial Censor Yuan can bear the crime of slandering an official of the Imperial Court." Soldiers from Xialing County. Yuan Baozhen's body stiffened. How was this possible? The leading red-clothed soldier cupped his hands and said, I am here on the orders of Xiaoling County Chief Shi to assist Governor Imperial Censor in investigating the murder of an official's family by the magistrate of Liangzhou. Murder of an official's family? When Sun Xiangfu heard this, he subconsciously cried out, Governor, I am innocent. The assassin in the residence has nothing to do with me. I don't know what is going on. You can't accuse me. Furthermore, the young master can see now. You can't arrest people just because you are angry. I am innocent, I am innocent. His cries were tragic and heartbreaking. Hearing this, Xiao Ju sneered, who said that the official's family was referring to Qingli Su. Not Qingli Su. Everyone, including He Yan, was stunned. At this time, a clear female voice came from outside the courtyard, I am the one who was murdered. Two people came into the courtyard. One was Xiao Ju's bodyguard, Qi Wu. The other was a Niao Niao wearing a warm dress. Her hair was tied into two buns. She had bright eyes and white teeth. Who else could it be but Song Tao Tao? Under the protection of Qi Wu, Song Tao Tao walked over to Xiao Ju and scolded Sun Xiangfu and Sun Ling, I am the daughter of the Vice Minister of Internal Affairs. You dare to kidnap me on the street? If it weren't for second young Master Xiao and young Master Qing saving me, I don't know what would have happened to me. The people from Wanhua Pavilion have already been captured by second young Master Xiao's people. There are witnesses and evidence. Let's see how you will deny it this time. When I return to Shuajing, I will tell my father about this. You can all wait to lose your heads. This little girl looked sweet, but her words were very imposing. She must hate Sun Ling. If it weren't for Sun Ling, she wouldn't have ended up in Wanhua Pavilion and suffered so much. Her fingers were almost broken. In other words, if it weren't for He Yan accidentally saving her that night, this little girl would have been ruined by Sun Ling. Sun Xiangfu and Sun Xiangfu's faces were ashen. If it was Xiao Ju and Qingli Su who were involved in the murder of an official's daughter, they could still argue. After all, the assassins were all dead and there was no evidence to prove that they were involved. But who knew that Xiao Ju would go so far and find such a little girl? Who would have thought that the girl Sun Ling kidnapped was the daughter of an official in the capital? But in these years, how could this be the only evil thing Sun Ling had done? The girls who were kidnapped to the Sun residence came from all over the country. There were also daughters of wealthy families or officials. But once they arrived in Liangzhou, it was like a needle in the ocean. There was no way out. Sun Xiangfu and Sun Xiangfu had covered the sky here for so many years that it had long been dark. Whether it was the daughter of a poor family or the daughter of a wealthy family, once they arrived here, there was no difference. He Yan stared at Xiao Ju's back and couldn't help but clap for him in his heart. Second young Master Xiao was nowhere to be seen these days. It turned out that he was busy with this matter. At that time, he thought that he took Song Tao Tao away to protect her. Now, it seemed that wasn't the case. After all, if Xiao Ju took Song Tao Tao with him and left her in the Sun residence, even if Sun Ling recognized her, he wouldn't dare to do anything. He sent Song Tao Tao away to prevent the Sun father and son from suspecting anything. Now, Song Tao Tao's appearance was the most important straw to convict Sun Xiangfu. This is all a misunderstanding. Commander-in-Chief, let me explain. Sun Xiangfu kicked Sun Ling, causing him to kneel down. Sun Xiangfu scolded, unfilial son, you've caused such a huge mess. What should we do now? Ask for forgiveness from the governor. County Magistrate's son kneeled to the wrong person, Xiao Ju said casually, I'm not the imperial censor. He looked at Yuan Baozhen and said slowly, Imperial Censor Yuan has been in Liangzhou for many days. You don't even know what's going on here. If someone finds out and accuses you of dereliction of duty, I'm afraid that even your teacher won't be able to save you. Yuan Baozhen was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He looked at Xiao Ju. The young governor had a smile on his face. His gaze was calm, but the malice in his eyes was overwhelming. He wasn't here for Yuan Baozhen. He was here for Sun Xiangfu. But this was actually worse because his teacher, Su Jingfu, definitely didn't want this situation. What did it mean to go for wool and come home shorn? This wasn't just a handful of rice, it was his entire granary being emptied. Ding Yi was missing. How could he deal with the aggressive Xiao Zhu alone? Song Tao Tao looked at the Sun family aggressively. He Yan was deep in thought. If it was just Song Tao Tao, he might be able to punish Sun Ling. But Sun Xiangfu might not. If there was someone protecting him, Sun Xiangfu might still have a way out. When Xiao Zhu made a move, would he leave a way out for others? He Yan didn't think so. Governor, please listen to our explanation. I'm really innocent. Sun Xiangfu and Sun Ling cried and howled. This matter concerned him. Yuan Baozhen said with difficulty, Governor, maybe there really is a misunderstanding. Xiao Zhu looked at him with a faint smile. After a while, he nodded and said, Go to the side courtyard. Go to the side courtyard? Why go to the side courtyard? When Sun Xiangfu and his son heard this, their expressions changed drastically. They almost fainted. The red-armored soldiers escorted Sun Xiangfu and his son to the side courtyard with the rest of the people. It rained last night. The dust on the ground of the courtyard was washed clean by the rain. It was originally a quiet and peaceful scene, but now it was overflowing with desolation and misery. He Yan looked sideways at the room next to him. The door was tightly shut. When he thought of the Buddha statues on and under the table last night, he couldn't help but feel disgusted. But, why did Xiao Zhu bring them here? Yuan Baozhen also didn't understand. Governor, do you want to dig 3 feet underground? Let Great Imperial Censor Yuan see what's underground. Although he was smiling, his expression was indifferent. His tone was very calm. He ordered the soldiers, dig. The soldiers obeyed the order. They searched the Sun family's residence for hoes and sickles and dug down. When Sun Xiangfu and his son saw this, they seemed to be unable to hold on. Their legs went soft and they fell to the ground. Their faces were ashen. Song Tao Tao asked He Yan in a low voice, What's underground? The house was full of Buddha statues, the talismans pasted on the door, and the overgrown weeds that grew in the deserted courtyard. He Yan's expression became serious. He could roughly guess. She didn't say anything. She really didn't know where to start. After a while, someone said, Governor, there's something here. It was a female corpse wrapped in a mat. Her body was very small, even smaller than Song Tao Tao's. The clothes she wore had already rotted, revealing her white bones. It was unknown how delicate she was in the past. She was pitiful and cute. Continue. Xiao Zhu said. Not long after, someone else said, There's a corpse here. It was also a female corpse. Her hair was long and it seemed like she had died not long ago. One could vaguely see her charm when she was alive. The third corpse, the fourth, the fifth, in the end, no one said anything. There was only the sound of digging. There was a deathly silence in the air. It was hard to imagine that the ground of this courtyard could hold so many corpses. The courtyard was full of corpses covered in white cloth. There was no place to put them, so they could only be piled up together. Under the deserted courtyard, there were countless skeletons of women buried. Perhaps there were gentle and shy flower girls, but there were also beautiful women. Here, regardless of whether they were rich or poor, high or low, they were all turned into mud and piled up into a mountain of unrecognizable corpses. These were all women who had been kidnapped by Sun Ling, then bullied and killed. They had suffered a great disaster when they were alive, and they could not rest in peace after death. The guilty man piled up countless Buddha statues and talismans to suppress and curse them. The altar lamp swayed forever. To these women, their lives were like an eternal night. There was no light. He Yan took a deep breath. The sins committed by Sun Xiangfu and his son were not covered by heaven and earth. God was angry and people abandoned them. Even after death, they were still punished. Chapter 102. In the abandoned courtyard, there were countless white bones hidden under the mud. Song Tao Tao did not dare to look and turned his face away. He was furious. After the last corpse was moved out, there was no other place to stand in the courtyard. Even though the red armor soldiers of Xiaoling County had seen many tragic scenes, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. This. Yuan Baozhen was also speechless. What does Imperial Censor Yuan want to say? Xiao Zhu spoke slowly, or is it that in your heart, this is still a misunderstanding? How can this be a misunderstanding? Without waiting for Yuan Baozhen to open his mouth, He Yan spoke first. This is Magistrate Sun's own residence. If someone were to bury female corpses here behind Magistrate Sun's back, it would be fine if it was 1 or 2 corpses, but if dozens or even hundreds of corpses were buried here, it wouldn't be hard to find out why an assassin would sneak in. The Sun family's front door is probably made of paper. Could it be that Magistrate Sun's family guards are all deaf and blind? Sun Xiangfu was sweating profusely. He didn't know how Xiao Zhu knew about this underground court case. He gritted his teeth for a moment and argued, these are just servants who committed crimes in this official's residence. After being beaten to death, they were buried here. This kind of thing often happens in large families. He Yan laughed coldly, I also come from a big family. Big families do not have this kind of cruel behavior. If these are servants who committed crimes, I would like to ask Magistrate Sun to take out their contracts. I think it would also record the reason why they were killed. In addition, the corpses on the ground are all women. Magistrate Sun, these are all your servants. You are a 7th-ranked magistrate and you have hundreds of servants in your residence. You can kill them as you wish. You are even more powerful than His Majesty. At the end of his words, his eyes and tone became fierce. It was difficult to resist. When he said this, Sun Xiangfu quickly knelt down and kowtowed, crying loudly, No! No! I am wronged. I am wronged. He kept repeating the same words over and over again, but he couldn't say why he was wrongly accused. The situation was already hopeless. He Yan's anger still hadn't subsided. He only felt that the person in front of him was really hateful. Last night, when she was fighting with Ding Yi had said that every Buddha statue in the room was a dead person. At that time, she had thought that Ding Yi was joking to scare her. Now it seemed that it was true. How ridiculous was that? Sun Ling and his son had done all kinds of evil in Liang province. They had kidnapped countless women, and if they did not like them, or if they were just tired of looking at them, they would easily take their lives. To be buried in the Sun family's backyard was already considered good. At least there was still a whole corpse. Who knew if there would be even more pitiful ones who would be thrown into a mass grave after death, and even their corpses would be eaten clean by the wolf beasts, leaving no trace behind. How arrogant and inhumane was this? Song Tao Tao felt a chill in her heart. If she hadn't met He Yan that night, would she have been like these women, becoming a pile of yellow soil and rotting in this dark underground, never to be discovered by anyone? Her eyes reddened, and she said hatefully, This is too despicable. We must avenge these women. As soon as she finished speaking, she felt someone poke her arm. She turned her head to look. He Yan was giving her a look, indicating for her to look at Yuan Baozhen. In an instant, Song Tao Tao understood what he meant. She turned to Yuan Baozhen and shouted, Uncle Yuan, I've suffered so much this time. You're the only person I trust here. You have to make a decision for me. Song Tao Tao's father used to be Yuan Baozhen's superior. Yuan Baozhen boasted that he had a close relationship with the Song family. Naturally, he could not ignore Song Tao Tao's words. He wiped his sweat and smiled, of course. Commander-in-Chief, this corpse is a bit different, a red-clothed soldier said. He squatted down, picked up a handkerchief, and wiped the face of the person on the ground, revealing the face. In the room full of female corpses, this person was the only man. He had died not long ago, and his expression was terrified. Tisk, the person who spoke was Xiaoju. He stood there and said slowly, looks like Imperial Censor Yuan's bodyguard has been found. The male corpse that was dug out was Ding Yi, whom Yuan Baozhen had been looking for since early in the morning. He Yan, after she killed Ding Yi last night, she was not in the mood to collect Ding Yi's body. She left immediately. However, Xiaoju discovered her identity and told Xiaoju that Ding Yi was dead. This was done by Xiaoju. She dragged Ding Yi out and buried him. Now that she dug out his body in front of Yuan Baozhen, He Yan felt a trace of sympathy for Yuan Baozhen. Yuan Baozhen's lips trembled, and he could not speak for a long time. The Imperial Censor's bodyguard was loyal and brave. He found many female corpses hidden in the backyard of the Sun family and was killed by Magistrate Sunday. Xiaoju looked at him with a faint smile. Imperial Censor Yuan, don't you feel pity for your bodyguard who died in vain? Nonsense. Sun Ling roared and stood up. He was pressed down by the soldiers beside him, but he did not give up. He struggled and shouted, I didn't kill him. This is slander. I don't know why he is here, I didn't kill him, he shouted until his voice was hoarse. In the silent courtyard, it was particularly ear-piercing. Xiaoju frowned and said indifferently, shut his mouth. The soldiers took rags and stuffed them into Sun Ling and Sun Xiangfu's mouths. This time, they could only make woo-woo sounds. Imperial Censor Yuan, Xiaoju looked at him and smiled faintly, what do you plan to do? Yuan Baozhen's heart was filled with hatred. He also knew that Ding Yi could not have been killed by Sun Xiangfu's men. The person in front of him already knew everything, but he could not refute. He could only squeeze out a few words from between his teeth, please advise me. Sun Xiangfu and his son had tyrannical power. They took bribes and robbed the people. They took advantage of the villagers. They kidnapped good girls and used them as bait. He said, as an Imperial Censor Yuan has the responsibility of investigating the officials and will not tolerate such vicious people. I have already informed the Xiaoling County Chief of this matter. Together with Imperial Censor Yuan, we will report this matter to the Emperor. As for Imperial Censor Yuan, he fixed his gaze on Yuan Baozhen and said with a hint of mockery, it is not my place to interfere whether it is a public report or a secret one. Yuan Baozhen almost couldn't breathe. He had clearly said, it is not my place to interfere, but he had already led this matter from beginning to end. Even if Yuan Baozhen wanted to do something, the Xiaoling County Chief had already reported it. He could not avoid it. Sun Xiangfu and his son's recommendation was Prime Minister Su's disciple. Prime Minister Su's disciples were all over the way. The case of the Yangzhou County Magistrate had embarrassed Prime Minister Su. In addition, to avoid suspicion, the new county magistrate would not be one of Prime Minister Su's men. Prime Minister Su had completely lost control of Liangzhou. How could he cause trouble for Xiaoju? When he returned to Shuajing, Prime Minister Su would not let him off easily. Yuan Baozhen only felt despair. Xiaoju turned to look at the servants shivering at the side and said, tell me what you know and you will be spared. She wanted the servants of the Sun Manor to expose the crimes of Sun Xiangfu and his son. The servants were still hesitant. They were afraid that Sun Xiangfu and his son would seek revenge if they escaped. However, the servants were overjoyed and went up to agree. As a woman, there was no way out in the Sun family. Even if they were beautiful, talented, and gentle, the best they could be given as gifts to their superiors. Maybe they could live for a few more years. Most of them were killed by Sun Ling and his son after they got tired of playing with them. Living here was like living in jail. No one knew when the day of execution would come. Now that they suddenly had a chance to live, they could not wait for Sun Xiangfu and his son to die immediately. Therefore, everyone said that the crimes committed by Sun Ling and his son were chilling. They only felt that such a cruel and merciless person would lead to the wrath of the gods and the resentment of ghosts. Fei Nu and the head of the soldiers of Xiaoling County recorded that Sun Xiangfu and his son were forced to kneel on the ground. Xiao Ju turned and walked out. Yuan Baozhen was still standing in the same place. With such a sudden change, he had no one to discuss it with. His thoughts were in a mess and he did not know what to do. Then, he saw the person who made him grit his teeth calmly walk over with a calm expression. The moment they brushed past each other, Xiao Ju suddenly stopped in his tracks. The young governor curled his lips and said in a low voice that only the two of them could hear, "Imperial Censor Yuan wants my life, but I want you to live. If you live, Su Jingfu will suffer more than if you die." He stood up straight and smiled mockingly. He said calmly, "When you return to Shuajing, send my regards to Prime Minister Su. Imperial Censor Yuan, have a safe trip." He turned and left. Behind him, someone exclaimed, "Imperial Censor Yuan. What happened to Imperial Censor Yuan? Imperial Censor Yuan?" Yuan Baozhen fainted. He Yen turned back to look. Xiao Ju's figure disappeared beyond the wall of flowers and could not be seen. This matter was settled. The county magistrate's manor was sealed by the soldiers of Xiaoling County. The originally imposing manor was now covered with seals and the lanterns were in a mess. It was in a state of decline. Song Tao Tao saw many female corpses in the courtyard and was very uncomfortable. He Yen comforted her for a long time and finally calmed her down. When Song Tao Tao felt sleepy and leaned on the table to rest, He Yen greeted Qi Wu who was protecting Song Tao Tao and went to find Xiao Ju. She still had some doubts. Xiao Ju was talking to Fei Nu's son Xiangfu and his son had done countless evil things. The servants had exposed them one by one. There was no need to mention them one by one. Just based on what they had done, no one could protect them. The sins they had committed were enough to kill them more than 10 times. In the whole of Dawei, it was rare to see such a heinous act. For ordinary people, it was tantamount to a disaster when a cruel person had power. Wolves, tigers, and leopards were scary, but how could they be compared to the viciousness of the human heart? "Uncle!" He Yen stood at the door and shouted. Xiao Ju and Fei Nu's conversation came to an abrupt end. He Yen walked in. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows, "You still call me uncle?" He Yen. "Governor." She said it as if anyone was willing to call him uncle. It was obvious that he was the one who took advantage of her, but he was still unwilling. "Why aren't you accompanying Miss Song? Why are you looking for me?" he asked. He Yen hesitated for a moment and asked, "Today, you punished Sun Xiangfu and his son. Why did you leave Yuan Baozhen behind? You clearly know that Yuan Baozhen was the one who wanted to kill you. Sun Xiangfu and his son were abominable and deserved to die." However, the person who tried to assassinate Xiao Ju at the banquet was town commander Yuan Baozhen. Ding Yi was already dead, but Yuan Baozhen could still return to Shuajing alive. Would Xiao Ju be so kind? "I didn't kill him here because he will die when he returns to Shuajing." Xiao Ju looked out of the window, "It's just a matter of time." "What about the others?" He Yen asked. "The Sun Xiangfu and his son in Liangzhou are able to do whatever they want. They must have accomplices. Those who supported Sun Xiangfu and those who supported Sun Xiangfu were still entrenched in Liangzhou. Why not kill them all?" Xiao Ju, "When the water is too clear, there will be no fish." "Lady He, you are too naive." Fei Nu stood silently at the side, as if he did not hear the conversation between the two. The trees outside the window were lush and green. Who knew that such a beautiful house would be buried with so many sins? In reality, Xiao Ju's goal was never Yuan Baozhen. He already knew that the banquet at the Sun Mansion was a trap. He also knew that Yuan Baozhen's appearance would definitely be murderous. He did not come to Liangzhou City to participate in a game of cat and mouse. Instead, he came to control Liangzhou City in the palm of his hand. He led the new soldiers to guard Liangzhou City in order to temporarily avoid the sharp edge and avoid Su Jingfu's eyes and ears. However, Old Dog Su's disciples were all over the way. The practice of selling official positions and titles was prevalent throughout the country. Sun Xiangfu of the Liangzhou City Guards was one of them. Yuan Baozhen came under Su Jingfu's orders. If he could kill Xiaoju, it would be best. If he could not kill Xiaoju, he would secretly contact Sun Xiangfu. Sun Xiangfu would directly take orders from Shua Jing. It was easy to trip up the Liangzhou City Guards. Even if a fly could not kill an elephant, it would be disgusting if it kept buzzing by one's ear. He Yan was blind on the night of the banquet. Xiaoju disappeared for the next few days. Everyone thought that he had left the mansion. Ding Yi also followed him. In reality, Ding Yi was following Fei Nu in disguise. The real Xiaoju had always been in the Sun Mansion. Sun Xiangfu had committed many evil deeds and had dealings with many wealthy families in Liangzhou City. These wealthy families offered Sun Xiangfu gold and silver, and Sun Xiangfu guaranteed their peace in Liangzhou City. He also bribed his superiors and subordinates. He took care of everything. Everything he did and the gifts he gave were recorded in an account book. Xiaoju found the account book and replaced it with a fake one. He also found something else here. Over the years, Sun Ling had killed countless girls. The original girls were all thrown into a mass grave. In the past 2 years, perhaps because he had done too many evil deeds, he had a guilty conscience and often had nightmares. The Sun family invited a Taoist priest to take a look. They said that they had to bury the girls who died in Sun Ling's hands in the northwest direction and suppress them with a Buddha statue charm. Thus, there was a mountain of corpses and a Buddha statue in the backyard. Xiaoju originally planned to use Song Tao Tao to punish the Sun family's father and son. With this discovery, even if Su Jingfu personally came to protect them, he would not be able to save them. In the past few days, he confirmed the people underground and searched for the account book. On the last day, he actually left the mansion. He did not do anything else outside the mansion. He picked a few people from the account book and copied the relevant records in the book one by one. He then sent them to the various manors. The business tycoons in Liangzhou City were all in his hands. In the future, when the new Liangzhou County Magistrate took office, no matter if he was Su Jingfu's man or not, he would not be able to do anything to him. From today onwards, Liangzhou City was his. Yuan Baozhen's biggest mistake was to miscalculate his direction. Xiaoju did not care about the assassination at the banquet. All he wanted was Liangzhou City. However, He Yan's appearance and strangeness attracted all of Yuan Baozhen's attention. In a way, He Yan also became the bait. It was just that this bait had a hook, and the prey that followed the scent to bite it. That was why things went so smoothly. While he was silent, He Yan was also thinking. Xiaoju had already expected today's events. She asked, "Did you let Yuan Baozhen go because Yuan Baozhen messed up his job and would be betrayed and punished by his master?" "That master is Prime Minister Su." She paused and asked, "Is Prime Minister Su the current Prime Minister Su Jingfu?" When she said this, even Fei Nu could not help but look at He Yan in surprise. She actually said it so directly. What she meant was that she did not know Su Jingfu. But who knew if she was lying? "Lady, he is so attached to the imperial court." "Does your father know?" Xiaoju said calmly. He Yan knew from his answer that the Prime Minister Yuan Baozhen mentioned was indeed Su Jingfu. "Although my father is only a military officer at the city gates, and Prime Minister Su is the current Prime Minister. It seems like the difference between heaven and earth, but a military governor should know better than to bully a poor youth. I am 16 this year, and I have defeated all of the Liangzhou guards. I am unrivaled. She boasted shamelessly, in the future, I might achieve great things and become an official with a higher rank than a military governor. So what if he is Prime Minister Su? I also have a younger brother who is younger than me. To say something disgraceful, we are like the rising sun, and Prime Minister Su is already in his twilight years. When my brother and I reach the age of a military governor, who knows if Prime Minister Su will still exist in this world. Fei Nu choked on his own words and coughed. Based on He Yan's words, there was an 80 to 90% chance that he was not one of Su Jingfu's people. How could Su Jingfu tolerate such a disgraceful thing being under his command? He Yan was afraid that it was all due to luck that he was able to survive until now. Xiao Ju heard this and sneered, you don't know the difference between life and death. Maybe you won't live as long as Su Jingfu. He Yan thought that Xiao Ju had guessed wrong. She had already lived one more life than Su Jingfu. Who cared about how long she lived? Military governor, you don't have to be so guarded against me. He Yan looked at him, we have a common enemy. I don't know, he said calmly, why would Su Jingfu bother to have a dispute with a military officer at the city gates? Naturally, a military officer at the city gates is not related to Prime Minister Su. However, if a dog bites someone, the master should also be held accountable. He Yan sighed, my enemy is Prime Minister Su's subordinate. In fact, I am Prime Minister Su's subordinate. She smiled, you and I share a common enemy. We should be friends. You have doubted me time and time again. It makes me very sad. Xiao Ju glanced at her. She did not look sad at all. Then you will be disappointed. He said, I don't make friends, and I don't make friends with liars. He Yan, was this person invulnerable to swords and spears? He really wanted to fight with him to vent his anger. Then military governor, He Yan held back his anger and asked, what about the corpses in the courtyard of the Sun residence? Those corpses had been there for a long time. Their faces could no longer be recognized and only the bones were left. Some of them could still be recognized. It was not a good idea to leave all of them in the Sun residence. Xiao Ju looked at the trees outside the window. The shadows of the trees swayed slightly. After a while, he said to Fei Nu, inform the people in the city to come and identify the corpses. When the people of Liangzhou city heard that the military governor of the Right Army had brought people to seal the gates of the Sun residence and detained the father and son of the Sun family, they all clapped their hands and cheered. Those who were more courageous ran to the Sun family's door and spat on the ground, cursing loudly. Those who were less courageous stood not far away and waited for the soldiers to pass by. They then pulled one of them and asked carefully, Sir, Magistrate Sun was really arrested? After so many years of darkness in Liangzhou city, it was finally dawn. It was a good thing that the father and son of the Sun family had pleaded guilty. The cries of the magistrate's residents shook the sky. Those who had lost their daughters or knew that their daughters had been kidnapped but could not do anything about it came to identify the corpses. The corpses of the women were laid out in the courtyard. They filled the front and back courtyards. Although it was autumn, there was still a strange smell. He Yan followed Fei Nu and saw a mother-in-law being supported by her daughter-in-law looking for her daughter who had been missing for 3 years among the corpses. There was also a young man dressed like a scholar holding his wife who had been kidnapped on the night of their wedding and crying loudly. He Yan saw a dark-skinned man in a white robe holding a female corpse and sobbing. Sister, sister. Brother is here. Brother will take you home. His voice was so sad that it made anyone who heard it cry. The little girl in his arms was small. She was at most 12 or 13 years old and was still a child. If the naughty ones in the family were at this age, they would still like to catch crickets and fight crickets. Now, her small body was curled up into a ball. It was hard to see her lively figure from the past. Before a flower bloomed, it had withered. The whole courtyard was filled with cries and goodbyes. He Yan looked up at the sky and felt that the cries were about to break through the sky. This was the most tragic thing in the world. Fei Nu looked at her with some surprise. Girls were soft-hearted and could not bear to see such a scene. Song Tao Tao, for example, had already hidden in the house and could not bear to watch. He Yan stood there. There was sadness in her eyes too, but she did not cry. He Yan had seen too many goodbyes in life and death. Many men on the battlefield went out as the eldest son of the family, the husband of the wife, and became a pile of yellow dust when they came back. Living in the world, there was no lack of joys and sorrows. These girls were bullied when they were alive and imprisoned when they died. They lived a miserable life. Now, they were finally free and returned to the embrace of their families. Their families would always remember them and shed tears for what they had gone through. What about her? He Yan thought in a daze. Was there such a person who would cry for her death? Who would remember her when there was no one around and feel pain for her? Her family in her previous life sent her to the Yellow Springs with their own hands. Even after she died, she was still used. Was there ever a moment when she received the sincerity of her family? Young master. Fei Nu's voice interrupted He Yan's thoughts. He turned his head and saw that Xiao Ju had come out. He asked, "Have the families of all the corpses been found?" Fei Nu shook his head. There are still 23 unclaimed corpses. Some of the girls who were kidnapped to the Sun family were like Song Tao Tao, who was not from Liangzhou. Once they were separated from their families, it was an eternal farewell. Let's bury them. He Yan was startled and looked up at Xiao Ju. He stood tall and straight in the desolate courtyard, like the drinking autumn sword hanging at his waist, sharp, calm, and reassuring. Young master, where should we bury them? Fei Nu asked. Outside Liangzhou city, there's a peak called Qingfeng. Xiao Ju looked into the distance, as if he saw something through the branches in the courtyard. His expression was calm and his tone was indifferent. However, there was a trace of imperceptible pity in his indifference. He said, "These girls had no choice when they were alive. They were like fish in a pond. Bury them here. May they be free in their next life and enjoy the wind." Chapter 103. As Xiao Ju had said, the 23 unclaimed female corpses were buried on the wind-riding platform outside of Liangzhou city. Looking down from the wind-riding platform, the valley was covered by clouds and mist, like a fairyland. The coffins were made of the best quality, made with silver from the Sun family's treasury. The Sun family had amassed a lot of wealth over the years, and they had even renovated a treasury to store their treasures. Because the 23 corpses' names and origins were unknown, there were no words to be carved on the final tombstones. 23 wordless tombstones, 23 young girls laid to rest here. If they knew after death, they could sit here and watch the clouds move. If they were reborn, just as Xiao Ju had said, they could ride the wind freely and roam freely. He Yan and Song Tao Tao stood not far away. Qi Wu stood on the side, looking at the people who were burning paper money on the ground. Xiao Ju did not come when the girls were buried. Many of the people who were burning paper money were looking for the missing girls, but they could not find their loved ones in the end. After all, many of the girls who were killed by Sun Ling did not even have a complete corpse, and were eaten by wolves and dogs in the wild. A white-haired old woman was burning paper money in a metal basin. She was so old that she could barely walk. Her grandson had to carry her up the mountain path. Her granddaughter was kidnapped by Sun Ling 4 years ago and never appeared again. Even now, there was no trace of her granddaughter among the corpses in Sun Ling's courtyard. The old woman trembled and said, "I'm burning paper money for these girls. In the future, if a kind-hearted person sees Dinyo, they will burn paper money for Dinyo." "Miss, rest in peace." Song Tao Tao used a handkerchief to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes and said, "Being a girl is too hard. If there is a next life, I don't want to be a girl. This has nothing to do with being a girl or not. He Yan looked at the paper money flying in the air. As a girl, we don't live to suffer. It's the same for men. If they are unhappy with their fate, they can walk a different path. It's just that. She looked at the wordless tombstones. For them, there is no choice. This is too cruel. Song Tao Tao looked at her. You are very different from normal men. What? If it were an ordinary man, he would probably say, "What's wrong with you women? All you need to do is sit in your room and dress nicely. When it's cold, there will be someone to put on your clothes. When you go in and out, there will be someone to serve you. There's no need for you to fight outside." She imitated the man's rough voice and said disdainfully, "Is it good to be a pet? Locking a bird in a cage and asking the bird to praise the cage for its beauty, I think they are the ones with problems in their brains." He Yan could not help but laugh. You are also very different from ordinary women. I'm different. By the way, Song Tao Tao looked at her, I still don't know your name. You're not Qing Li Su. You're second young master Zhao's subordinate, right? My name is He Yan. He Yan said, he as in firewood, Yan as in clear sea. So it's big brother He, Song Tao Tao said. You can call me Tao Tao. This. He Yan scratched his head. Wasn't this a little too intimate? Although they were all women, if others didn't know and saw it, they would probably start to have wild and fanciful thoughts. Then it's settled, Song Tao Tao said. I've already agreed with second young master Xiao that I will temporarily go with you to the Liang province guard. When second young master Zhao's people arrive, he will send someone to send me back to Shuajing. Therefore, in the following days, I may have to stay with you. Song Tao Tao's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. I haven't been to the guard station yet. She became happy again and chattered endlessly. Miss Song, Chi Wu looked into the distance. It's getting late. This subordinate will send you down the mountain first. Let's go, He Yan also said. They walked down the mountain with their backs to them. At the steps of the wind-riding platform, there were clusters of white chrysanthemums growing in the grass. When the breeze blew, the chrysanthemums nodded slightly, as if a graceful young girl was thanking them. Not long after, they could no longer see them. After going down the mountain and returning to the inn they were staying at, Song Tao Tao dove into the room to take a bath. She had been busy today and had left quite a bit of ash on her body from burning paper money. She needed to wash it off. Since the Sun residence was sealed, she naturally couldn't go back. Thus, she went back to the inn she came from. The innkeeper knew Xiao Ju's true identity. Now that Sun Xiangfu and his son had become prisoners, he didn't dare to be negligent. The innkeeper was so attentive that he seemed to be a servant of some household. He surrounded He Yan and the others. He Yan said, It's fine, I can do it myself. She took a handkerchief and went directly into the room. Fei Nu was packing things in the room. When he saw her, he was shocked. He Yan asked, Brother Fei Nu, what are you doing? Fei Nu said with a wooden face, I'm staying with Chi Wu. When they were in the Sun residence, the three of them stayed together. Xiao Ju was in the inner room while Fei Nu and He Yan were outside. Thus, they didn't feel that there was anything wrong. He Yan casually said, It's so troublesome to move around. Fei Nu stood still and looked at her in disbelief, You're a woman. How can you stay with me in the same room? He Yan said. You don't have to put on an expression like you can't bear to be humiliated. Fei Nu didn't say anything. He quickly packed his things as if she was a scourge. He couldn't avoid her and immediately left. He Yan was the only one left in the room. She was startled for a moment. Then, she shook her head and smiled. In the eyes of Xiao Ju and her servant, her behavior was very unexpected. But in her previous life, she had been in the army for a long time. What was so difficult about living with a man? She was a girl and she didn't feel shy. She didn't know why Fei Nu was acting so awkward. He Yen walked to the bed and found that there was water and clean white cloth on the table. There was also hot water for bathing in the room. It must have been put there by Fei Nu. She still had injuries on her body. This person was like his master. Sometimes he was unreasonable, but sometimes he was quite considerate. There was no one in the room. She sat down and took off her clothes. She took a rough bath. She didn't have time to examine the wounds from yesterday. After she changed the old cloth, she found that the wounds were not shallow. Naturally, it was very painful, but she could endure it. He Yen leaned over and looked at the girl in the mirror. Her originally white skin had a knife wound. It certainly didn't look good. Lady, he cherished her beauty. She wanted to pamper her with nectar. She had just arrived, but she was already unrecognizable. If the real lady he came back and saw this scene, she would be so angry that she fainted. She was already very careful to protect herself, but once she decided to rely on herself to go out and lose the protection of her family, she was bound to get hurt. Humans grew from being hurt again and again, and scars would eventually become armor one day. A female general's body could never be as flawless as an ordinary girl's. The old wounds on her body were like a piece of paper that had been scratched by a strange knife. It couldn't be considered beautiful. It could even be called terrifying. Which girl didn't like to be beautiful? Even though He Yen had been a man for more than 10 years in his previous life, when he changed back into women's clothes and looked at the scars on his back and body, he still felt ashamed when facing Su Jiheng. She never wore thin gauze clothes. Once, Su Jiheng gave her a water lily-colored pomegranate gauze dress. There were pomegranate flowers embroidered on the shoulders and neck. It was as thin as a cicada's wing. She liked it very much. But she never wore it even once. It was because her shoulder was pierced by an enemy arrow on the battlefield. When she pulled the arrow out, it left a scar that could never be removed. She also remembered the look in Su Jiheng's eyes when he looked at those scars. Although he didn't say anything, he deliberately avoided looking at her. It was more hurtful than directly saying that he didn't like it. He Yen stared at the bronze mirror in a daze. Why were scars a medal on a man, but a disgrace on a woman? How unfair was this? It was only natural for people to think that women used their beauty to serve others, so they had to maintain their beauty at all times. What a load of nonsense. He Yen lowered her head and carefully applied the ointment to the wound. Then, she wrapped the wound with a cloth. She did these things with ease. When it hurt, she didn't even frown. Soon, the wound was healed. After doing all this, she rested in the room for a while. Then, she pushed the door open and went to Xiao Ju's room. The light in the room was on. Xiao Ju should be inside. He Yen knocked on the door. Commander-in-Chief. Come in. She pushed the door open and entered. Second young Master Xiao was putting away the evening fragrance zither on the table. He Yen almost forgot that he had come to Liangzhou City to repair the zither. Speaking of repairing the zither, He Yen remembered that when she was drunk, she crushed his zither. Commander-in-Chief. He Yen braced himself and said, "Have you eaten?" Xiao Ju stopped what she was doing. "If you have something to say, say it. Are we going back to the Imperial Guard station tomorrow?" He Yen asked. "How do you plan to deal with me?" Now that Xiao Ju knew that she was a girl, what if Xiao Ju really wanted to send her back to Shuajing? Now that she finally had some clues about He Rufei, she would rather die than go back. "How do you want me to deal with you?" Second young Master Xiao sat down at the table and looked at her calmly. He Yen hurriedly moved a stool to sit beside him and analyzed the situation seriously. "You have seen my abilities. This time, when you brought me to Liangzhou, I was the one who warned you about the assassin, and I was also the one who helped you distract Yuan Baozhen. In the end, I killed Ding Yi. If I think about it carefully, I have done more for you than Big Brother Fei Nu, who was sitting next to them, sneezed. A person like me, as a subordinate, as a confidant, I am good at understanding others. He Yan praised himself without any burden. With me, the Liangzhou Guard will be like a tiger that has grown wings. Commander-in-Chief, I think that if you put me in the 9 Flags Battalion, you will not regret it. Xiao Ju smiled and asked slowly, 9 Flags Battalion. I know that you are a straightforward person, and you must be suspicious of my purpose in joining the 9 Flags Battalion. I will be frank with you, because it takes too long to make a name for yourself. I heard that in the 9 Flags Battalion, even if you are handicapped in the future, you can still become an official. Our He family relies on me to bring honor to our ancestors, and I think that the 9 Flags Battalion is a good place to go. Her words were magnanimous. Xiao Ju picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. She said calmly, you don't have to wait until the future. I think you are handicapped now. He Yan. What? Could it be that Xiao Ju could tell that she was young Mistress Su and was blind in her previous life? Just as she was feeling nervous, she saw this person point at her own head. He Yan. He was the one with a problem in his head. Why was she scolding him all of a sudden? However, he had no choice but to lower his head. He Yan forced a smile. Commander-in-Chief, don't you think so? Xiao Ju stared at her and sneered. Liar, the 9 Flags Battalion does not accept incompetent people. Incompetent people? Xiao Ju could question her character, but she could not question her ability. He Yan slammed the table. Who are you talking about? Someone like Ding Yi, you were injured when you fought with him. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. Her beautiful eyes were full of ridicule. If you are not incompetent, then what are you? That was because Lady He's body was weak. Moreover, she had learned her lesson from her previous life. Of course, she had to be careful. If Brother Fei Nu was here, he would also be injured. You can use your deceitful mind to practice martial arts. Perhaps you will improve a lot. The more familiar this person was with her, the more he began to reveal the nasty side of him when he was young. He Yan took a deep breath and suddenly smiled. Alright, I don't care if you insist on saying that. I don't care if you are prejudiced against me. It's just that I suddenly missed the red mole on your waist. Xiao Ju's calm expression suddenly cracked. This rumor is originally a rumor, but as it spread, it became true. I was originally the daughter of a military officer at the city gate. My family is not prosperous and I am not famous. It is my good fortune to be able to have the same name as the governors. He Yan stood up and said slowly, in the future, when others talk about me, they will say that I was once glorious and that I was the governor's beloved woman. Thinking about it, I feel that it is not a loss. It is just that it is difficult for the governor to be tied to someone like me. However, the governor does not care about what others say, so it should not matter to you. Xiao Ju stared at her. Her gaze was like a knife. She said in a low voice, what beloved woman? He Yan replied with a smile, I am so outstanding that everyone in the Liangzhou Guards knows me. They have always admired me as a rare good man. When they suddenly found out that I am a woman, they would definitely not believe it. They would also wonder why a woman entered the military camp. I can only say that it is because the governor loves me deeply and cannot bear to be separated from me. That is why he hid me in the military camp and even brought me to Liangzhou Guards. If others heard this, they would only be envious of my good luck. Of course, they would also sigh at how deep the governor's love is. When Xiao Ju heard this, she did not get angry. Instead, she laughed, shameless. He Yan placed her hand on the table and quickly said, I am not an unreasonable person. I did not ask the governor to let me enter the 9 Flags camp through the back door. I only hope that the governor will give me a chance to prove myself. We will return to the guard station together and pretend that this did not happen. I also hope that the governor will put aside his prejudice against me and treat me as an ordinary soldier. Oh right, she seemed to have thought of something. I am currently injured and need to change my dressing at night. It is inconvenient for me to live with men. I will have to trouble the governor to find a room for me alone, the kind where I can bathe in. Xiao Ju said coldly, don't even think about it. Then I can only be the governor's beloved woman. He Yan turned around indifferently, even if you put me in a carriage and send me back to Shuo capital, I can immediately spread the news. Oh, I think this inn is not bad. As long as I scream. Xiao Ju face-bombed, He Yan. He Yan smiled with a hidden dagger, who told me to be a liar? Xiao Ju, I promise you. He Yan's face changed faster than the innkeeper's 3-year-old child. She patted her chest and said regretfully, I am a little disappointed that I can't be the governor's beloved woman. Xiao Ju's face turned ashen, get out. He Yan happily whistled and left. The next morning, when Fei Nu and Qi Wu woke up and went out, they found that He Yan was even earlier than the two of them. It was probably because she was going to return to the Liang province guard station. She purposely tidied herself up and picked out a set of clothes that Qingli did not wear often. She was born with delicate features. If Fei Nu did not know that she was a woman, she would have praised her in her heart for being such an elegant young man. Qi Wu did not know He Yan's identity. She crossed her arms and looked at him from afar. She whispered to Fei Nu, you said that this person is invincible in the Liang province guard station? Look at his body, it doesn't seem like it. Fei Nu sighed. That was not the only thing that didn't seem like it. As they were talking, Song Tao Tao came up from downstairs with a handful of red dates in her hand. When she saw He Yan, she naturally reached out and smiled, Big brother He, these are the dates the innkeeper sent over. They are very sweet. Do you want to try them? Liang province was rich in red dates. They were all big and sweet and looked very pleasing to the eye. He Yan took them and said, thank you. The young man and young woman stood there, pleasing to the eye and causing people to daydream. Qi Wu poked Fei Nu's arm and said mischievously, I feel that something is wrong. Could it be that second Miss Song has taken a fancy to He Yan? What about young Master Cheng? Fei Nu looked at him with a complicated expression. What are you worrying about? How can this be called worrying about nothing? Young Master Cheng is young Master's uncle. Of course, we have to help young Master Cheng. How about I teach that boy a lesson in private and tell him to stay away from second Miss Song? Our young Master Cheng is pure and kind. How can he be He Yan's opponent? Look at him smiling at second Miss Song. TSK, TSK, TSK. I can't stand it anymore. Don't talk so much. Young Master hates people who gossip. Fei Nu said, you and I just need to do our job well. Qi Wu still wanted to say something, but the door opened and Xiao Ju came out. Commander-in-Chief. He Yan greeted her warmly. Xiao Ju acted as if she didn't see her. She passed by her and didn't even give her a glance. She said to Fei Nu, is the carriage ready? They are waiting downstairs. Fei Nu replied. Let's go. He went downstairs. Qi Wu and Fei Nu looked at each other. Qi Wu asked in a low voice, did the surnamed He make our young master angry? Let's get to work. Fei Nu didn't answer and followed her downstairs. Second young master Xiao treats people coldly as usual. Song Tao Tao stood on He Yan's side, which made He Yan feel quite moved. The little girl said to her sympathetically, it must be very difficult for you to work under him. When I return to Shuojing, I will talk to my father and see if I can get you an official position in the capital. With your skills and character, it shouldn't be difficult. Huh? He Yan didn't expect Song Tao Tao to have this plan. She waved her hand and said, that's not necessary. Thank you for your kindness, Miss Song. It's just that I am doing well in the Yangzhou Guard. Military Governor Xiao is not an unreasonable person. He is very good. It is my honor to work under him. Song Taotao only thought that she was speaking up for Xiao Ju and didn't think much of it. How is he worthy of you working under him? The people in Shuajing all say that he is cold and heartless. Although Xiao Ju's temper wasn't very good, He Yan couldn't go against his conscience and scold him. He only smiled and said, he isn't good. But didn't he find a way to make trouble for the Sun family's father and son who bullied you? If he really isn't good, why would he care about the unclaimed female corpses in Sun Xiangfu's residence? Why would he bury them and invite monks to help them cross over? But Song Taotao still wanted to argue. The young man smiled and patted her head. He said warmly, Miss Song, you are still young. You don't know that many things can't be seen on the surface. Many people also need to get along with them to understand their character. Those who are kind and considerate to you are not necessarily good people. Evil people that you think are cold and heartless may have a side that others don't know. Song Taotao was stunned. Before she could figure it out, He Yan had already walked down the stairs. Her head seemed to still be warm from the young man's palm. She blushed and quickly chased after him. She muttered softly, what do you mean by young? You are not much older than me. In the end, they didn't continue arguing. He Yan lowered his head and smiled. The words that Xiao Ju said to those pitiful girls yesterday echoed in his ears. Outside Liangzhou City, there is a mountain peak called Qingfeng. These girls had no choice when they were alive. They are buried here. May they be free to ride the wind in their next lives. He could understand the despair of those girls, which was why he said such words. Therefore, she magnanimously forgave Xiao Ju's rudeness to her and didn't take his bad behavior to heart. After all, there weren't many gentle people in this world. She went downstairs and saw Xiao Ju standing in front of the carriage. She walked over and asked, Commander-in-Chief, will you ride with me? Song Taotao was a little girl after all. When they came here, they all rode horses. When they came back, they couldn't let Song Taotao ride with them. Therefore, they ordered Fei Nu to arrange for 2 carriages. Xiao Ju tilted his head and looked at her. He Yan explained, I can't sit in the same carriage as Miss Song. We are a single man and a single woman. If others see us, Miss Song's reputation will be tarnished. Xiao Ju asked, So I should sit in the same carriage as Commander-in-Chief? He Yan said with a smile. He was about to get into the carriage when Xiao Ju grabbed him by the back of his collar and pulled him down. If He Yan didn't grab his sleeve, he would have lost his balance. You don't think of yourself as a woman, and you don't think of me as a man? He raised his eyebrows, liar, I'm afraid you are too immersed in the act, so I'm reminding you. The mission is over. You don't have to think of yourself as Qing Li Su. After he said this, he brushed off the sleeve that He Yan had just grabbed. Qi Wu passed by and happened to hear Xiao Ju's last sentence. He immediately grabbed He Yan's clothes and pulled him to the side. That's right, that's right. You still think of yourself as young Master Cheng. How can you be so blind? Come here and ride with us. He Yan was just joking. He didn't really want to ride with Xiao Ju. He quickly got on the horse. Fei Nu instructed the coachman, there are girls in the carriage. Don't ride too fast. He Yan was stunned and couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't that she was thinking too much. It was just that she was injured in the fight with Ding Yi. She couldn't ride too hard. Who knew if this was intentional? She was also a girl. Qi Wu said, what are you waiting for? Let's go. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.